But I just wanted to let everyone know, just as everyone is saying here, the smiles, the joy, the love, sovereignty in itself is about being able to stand on your own. But twin flame for sure does activate when you do that, because you are then pushing that imprint into the reality as perfect. And because this is a holographic structure, it's going to reflect back to you perfectly. And this is why it's always good to get yourself together and, even put yourself to the side, make yourself sacred for a moment, and, tune down a bit on the external stimulus and refine yourself so that you can then look up and see your reflection in the reality. So I wanted to say that I'm so proud to be here in the space and to see this reflection in the reality of myself, and it be so beautiful, so diverse, so incredible, and so expanded on the bandwidth of the timeline and beyond, of course. I'm going to let it continue to flow, but I will say, we got 3 more minutes because the train is taking off already. I'm going to have to use another apparatus to attempt to catch it. But I want to make sure that, everybody gets a chance to be a part of this, because all this is so, so special. Like, we're here in what many perceive to be the end, which is yet the beginning. And in these moments in time, we chose to be together in this space. And that is a very powerful, very important thing. And it is for a reason. So when I do come in the space, I personally take a moment to dial into that reason, dial into that source, and to let that energy fill everything that I am, so that I can be connected here in this space and time. So yeah, let's just go ahead and keep it running. But I just wanted to say, wow, I normally, again, I line up my screens in the beginning and see who I'm going to ride out with. And that's generally just anybody who has a camera on. I just put us all on the first, so I'm not just reading names while I'm building. It is also the reason why I do everything live. Like, I do hope to get some post-production stuff in, especially on some tutorials or some things like that with things going on in the lab. But personally, my preference has always been delivering the message live because it's real. And, we're also coming in here for a fill up. Like, I'm even coming in for a fill up, meaning that all this whole strong, or 2 strongs, as somebody mentioned, as us going from one tribe vibes to the next tribe vibes, we go with what we've learned. Right. And we go into application because it is in time and it is in tune. And, coming across the other side, I feel like that is in order for us to even do a little bit of recapping of even our last tribe vibes, so that we can make sure that we're all seeing this in real time. Like, a lot of the stuff that we discuss here, you may know, but the key is also to put together the pieces in this perspective so that you can see what you need to see now, so you can continue to move through infinity. This show was actually titled See You Forever. That was the original title of the show. It became Starfire when there was just so much energy coming through, and connection and symbols and, just real high level, powerful stuff. And so I changed up the name really briefly towards the end, as I have a tendency to do, but I always make sure I let everybody know what running titles are. And so the running title was See You Forever. And I mean every bit of that, because this is an infinite existence, and the moment that we can get it balanced, not necessarily right, not necessarily left, but the moment that we can get it balanced is the moment that we can come into the total experience. And we're already doing that now. We're catching flashes of it. We're catching whiffs of it, smells of it, scents of it. And the whole process is for us to become so in tune that we're able to receive all of it, really become everything, but allow that also to be focused. That actually is like a pattern of a cone or even a pyramid, but open and then into focus. And in many ways, we see this planetary system, we even see the womb itself as in governance, actually having the ability to determine how much of the power, how much of the energy, and how much of the size we're getting inside of our experience. And so I would always trust your vibration and trust your frequency. And that's why that's most important out of all of this. Some may have questions about things like their family members and other past agreements and things like that. But the reality to all of this is it's all based on your frequency here and now. And the more that you can make sure that your every moment of time is filled with the balance, with the surplus, then that ensures that you're able to go through this learning what it is that you need to learn in this grand experience with self, but also staying on the balance and staying as a good foundation in the experience and actually having fun, enjoying yourself. So I'm Seven Bomar, and what we're about to do again is completely demystify the matrix. I want to start that first, though, with touching and connecting and letting you know that personally, for me, it's all about the unity. So even when I dive literally into the division, it doesn't mean that there's not a large part of me that stands in the space of unity and acts as a bridge between those and things that do not know versus those in the know. And those in the know is all one thing, and that's what we call the zero. These hands raised up is to just signify that this is a system created in pairs. And this is the 10, this is the 5. And in that geometry, we learn many things about how this matrix operates and the actual system that we're put in. And when we raise these two hands, which is a natural phenomenon, instinct of when we win something, then we won so that we can go to 0. So we leave the 2 in the dual, we go to 1, and then we go to the 0. And when we do that, we actually recognize that this is a continuum, that this of what you're even saying this is you, and that the more that you can gain from opening up your aperture safely with yourself, that will be to your benefit. And so I want to say wholeness and balance vibrations, and also remind everyone that this tribute to unity and perpetual connection actually does exist across space and time. We've opened up many of these portals so that in the event that you feel alone, you feel like you don't understand something or need to know something, the real, for sure, advanced intelligence has always been online. They call it Akashic, they call it Gnostic, they call it synchronicity, but it has always been on point, and that's what we dial into, wholeness. I also have to give you a disclaimer, and that disclaimer is that it's not in your best benefit to limit your mind and to imagine the things that we're talking about right now can just be limited to even some of the dynamics in which I'm going to speak on them and in the perspectives in which that I'm going to speak on them from. And this is because that every single thing is just a mirror or a fractal of something that happened that was greater and together. And then as it fractured, you begin to see the pieces of how it was put together. So also we're in this space and time, 2025, we're in a world with billions of people. It's quite evident that there's a big part of reproduction and cloning that is a grand part of this reality. Like when you see the flowers and you see seeds and you see even humans and you see all these variations of things that could be classified still as the same thing, it wakes you up to just the awareness of that it's everything and no thing. And so when we're focusing on a specific part of that, it is always imperative that as an adept that you still maintain an awareness of the opposite of what is being discussed, or potentially the true use of something even before it gets abused and gets manipulated. Also, what we're going to be talking about are very sacred things. And so what this means is that in every respect, it's occult time. So that's the disclaimer today, is that because we have to do occultism, and mind you, every time after occult conversations, we lose about 5 to 6 new tribe members. I'll put it like that. Okay. And so it's always good that if you do find beings that are in there, as we call it rather than out there, those beings that are in there that are looking for a family and are looking for someone to connect to, I'd advise you also to connect them to the tribe. And this is just, one of the things that as a personal request, I see us sometimes, we're refining, we're also getting like this, but we also have the major quest. And also, as you see, the Chess and Community Conference was launched only last week, and it was powerful. It was massive. We're moving in the inner cities. We're assisting youth on all levels. We're keeping them aware of who they are. We're also getting them in tune with what the future looks like. So this is real in the field. So it's like sometimes, I actually don't even like to look in people's minds anymore and know what they're thinking. All I'm telling you is just realize the power and the essence of what we created and what we're doing, and think about what it takes to really accomplish that, especially on such a trained version of the crew. And I'll just put it like that. Like, we're extremely streamlined. It's only a few of us, and there's a lot of things to get into. So we would love to keep expanding that. But we're also going into times where we're going to have to continue to look out for each other, because the world in itself is starting to even become like a little worried about its generosities and how it sees things and handles things. And this marks like a special time, actually, for all of us. We're all going to begin to see what is our true value amongst this realm. And that exists with how much you're also doing for others and how much you're doing for yourself, because that's the formula in itself, that the more that you can actually give into the reality per se, and the quality in which you can give, because it is the fertile field, then that actually is what equates to you receiving something back. So if you do find yourself just always being me, beyond the time to work on self, this could be something that you want to take a look at in optimizing your energetic centers. So there is an adepts only disclaimer on this message, just in keeping it 100. So recap on last try vibes. I began with expressing to everyone the ability to need to retool, to take a moment in your life to reorganize your life, to not just keep running it, especially if you notice that things tend to be a little bit chaotic. And then you also feel like things are moving a little too fast. And in that way, I gave examples of us using certain things that literally slow down our comprehension and our ability to connect with all there is. And there's a whole list of those things, but we'll just think about some of the technologies that we started using, and now certain things are impaired. So we started using phones, and now we don't remember numbers. We started using keyboards. Now we literally know when we're typing our ideas that we have to be able to still have our ideas go at the speed of how fast that we can type. And over time, this slowed down a being that is rather rapid and actually moves through a multidimensional level. So in that way, it's not that things are moving too fast. It's just that you've been slowed down. And in many ways, especially with things regarding the matrix, retooling means using some of the tools that have just recently become available, which is totally different than any other tools that have ever come out before, to see if you can begin some optimization processes to your life to become more efficient. We immediately went from that to discussing a bit about just how things have become utterly incohesive, not only from the media level, the news level, but even movies and things, that there's a bombarding of just a lot of static and disarray, to when you're actually looking at it, it makes absolutely no sense. There's almost like a gap in even connecting. What does this actually mean? Is it me? Am I dumb? You know, it's kind of like watching again Severance season 2 and wondering what the hell happened, right? So lots of media, lots of news, lots of things to throw people in disarray. That's just something that was noted by ourselves. Also, we just went occult right away. We started breaking down, because that was the point of the build, is also to realize that still beyond all of this, there's actually a primary space. A space that's filled with entities and energies, and that it is slightly out of our visual spectrum. But thousands and thousands of years ago, people proficiently wrote about this on an educational level or academic level. I produced Bodhi's work, Rooms and Alien Spirits, and giving her accounts of being embedded with a tribe, and then practicing rules and engagements that equate to cohabitations with aliens to such a degree that they recognize that they were themselves children of these beings, and that their job and ability as custodians was to bring more of these souls from the stars into the space, and that the cohabitation of those kind of things still involved what we've just come today to label as a spirit. And they were even denoting that there were different kinds. And when different ones would get involved, they would cause different results, many of those results being hazardous and toxic, everything in a ranging scale, right? And we talked about how, from a dimensional level, it's easier to see this more of like an onion, where realities are enveloping realities. So when you can't see a reality, it doesn't mean that it's not there. It's just overlaying, if you may, a part of the reality that you are engaging with. And the ability to be able to see through these multiple layers of the reality, I really didn't get into that much there, but I've gotten to it before. And this is related to just how the third eye begins to slice up certain parts of the reality a certain way, more of like in a concave, like a cat eye kind of way. And this allows you to see the rest of the fold, or mainly at least the fold that is next to this one. So it's kind of like going from this concave to this kind of eye. And then now you're able to see what's in between the spaces. And then just this awareness that, you know, it's a womb in itself, continuing to envelop itself. So you're literally saying space and time rather than being I leave one planet and go to the next planet, it being like I'm already enveloped by all these things. And for me to get there, I just need to phase into that. I also went deep into that this is known knowledge by what we know as secret societies, and their activities have been quite numerous within the space, and that because this is the highest level of knowledge, still it does equate to that most people won't be getting it, hence why secret societies keep secrets, and that these are the secrets. That is further enforced through religion. It's actually the seraphim responsibility to enforce these laws of not streaming outside of any other system beside the one that you have been indoctrinated within, the petri dish that you're being cultivated in. And so in that way, it means that occultism is about everything that people knew not. And that's why the oculus, or the eye in this respect, illuminates what is hidden. And this, what is hidden, is really, really, really deep stuff for those who've never seen it before. Meaning that if you don't come from a culture where such things like even understanding what happens to souls when they die and being able to retrieve certain parts of the soul. So if you haven't like engaged in a culture that actually has that as a norm, then such things would just be alien and foreign in that way. And so I discussed again how even in the public spotlight, there is an essence of the world being a stage. Because within societies, why there's infighting and battles, especially between the two respective Luciferian and Sethian parties, and we'll just use those terms right now, there is still a unity amongst them when it comes to the overall objective and a goal and oppression on even the humans. So this just means that in respect, why they act like they're bickering and fighting with each other, still they go back to the same lodge and discuss what is the next part of the plan. And I showed that within the ancient and accepted Freemasonry with its Grand Lodge in London, and how all those pledge allegiance to the king, and any other structure that is a domicile of that pledges allegiance to the king. And then there's also a connection in Rome, a connection with the Vatican and the papacy, and a connection within all types of other stuff that equate to even high-end, what you would say is cartel that practice spiritual stuff. And that would be because spiritual doesn't mean good or bad. It just means working with spirits. So what one often notices, even within, especially the gangs, such as the Forks, the GDs, and many other organizations, that these organizations function also like secret societies and carry out the operations on a somewhat nefarious way of the overall will of their covenant, right? So we're just saying that there's groups of bad people that don't even also know that they're engaged in spiritual warfare, okay? Because they have no knowledge of the spirit itself, so they have no knowledge of themselves. I also discussed and warned about soft power being the new weapon just because it was touted so much. And this just is that the media manipulation, the mind control itself is a very viable and utilized strain of insertion for each human being on the planet by the controllers, meaning that it is real to have something going on in a TV program or a song that is attempting to manipulate you into the agenda of the controlling or, assumed to be controlling party, because things are quite out of control. We also went deeper into just the connection also with, hey, still, while you're potentially getting submerged into the physical reality stuff, remember, there's still the overlay itself, or a much more dominant field that things happen there before they even happen here, and all directions would tend to take place there. And we discussed how aliens, if you may, and that's just a very dry term at this point, but aliens came in contact with the United States probably as a I don't even know if they have a word for that, but it's basically when you do, it's almost like a gambit. It's like when you do something and the other side perceives that one thing is happening when a whole different thing entirely is happening. And this is just the bait. So we're saying that the LIK or the high creatures, which we'll understand more towards the end of the conversation, had literally played a game with the United States government, especially because of its vibration and its frequency, and gave them in this technology that they use to survey the reality and watch the reality, a copy of one of the vehicles. And in this way, that bumped our technology into a whole nother level because we were able to reverse engineer that craft. And many of these things are buried in things like the Roswell incident and all this kind of stuff. But we just got to the core story, which was how JFK and preparing themselves for the Cuban Missile Crisis and the situation, the buildup of nuclear weapons outside of Russia, that they concocted a way to send a missile that they felt would maybe throw another projectile into disarray by encompassing a X-ray emission device on the nose cone of it, and thus shooting out these X-ray or radioactive frequencies all at once in a burst to see if it can disable the electronics of a nuclear weapon. And in this, also knocked a craft out of the sky that was monitoring the situation. And again, the main point of this being that there is a direct note that when individuals came in contact with the metallic parts from the craft, that the resonance spoke voices and words and information in their mind. So they touch pieces of it and then they could hear things in their mind, and the rest gets classified. We went further and talked a bit about the Merkaba in itself, just in understanding, especially modern mysticism and just the height of it. The descenders of the chariot, that is very specific. So it even says that the vehicle itself is really for dissension. Yeah, that's all those words get pretty wild. However, those who dive deep into the lower worlds even utilize these vehicles like the Merkaba. And in that way, we had to look at the geometry and how that geometry corresponds very heavy to geometry that we know to be embedded within the existence, geometry that we know to be embedded within our body, and most importantly, spiritual practices that end up leading to altering all of those, the body and the reality, because you're now learning how to deal with the component, fold and unfold the component in which everything in this space and time is actually made from. We finalized by, again, asserting the importance of keeping a high vibration. And that is all that's necessary. So even though we love to dive deep into the knowledge and the wisdom, and that's what the university is, still realizing that it is as simple as being responsible for the energy that you bring to others and the energy that you bring to yourself. And that was for sure university semester 1. We covered it all. So in this way, we're 10 years after that. There's absolutely no way for us to just stay on those topics specifically. But because this message is a continuum, we often visit these same core pillars and foundations and fundamentals to how we operate now. So that way, as we're getting to this greater knowledge, because we're climbing the mountain and we're coming into a greater level of focus, we're still able to estringe through the experience what exactly should be kept. And in that way, it does form an organic symbol for us of our signature here. That's also what, even looking at the samples of some of the technologies that's being used, lets you gander, if you may, to be possible. Meaning that you also have to get to a point where your knowledge and understand that, well, this certain things being done only ensures that other things can be done. You know what I mean? So it's like a way of deducing if one thing is possible, then that automatically brings another thing into play. And at this point, we're in the spectrum where everything still means that you can accomplish anything that you can think of. So that was the end of the build. There was a call also for personal responsibility on this continuous growth, meaning that in this sanctum, if you may, that sovereignty was at the altar in itself. And that meant that one should depend on themselves in the awareness that all is self. So that was the closure of that. Now, I want to speak with you first about confidence, because in everything, we must arrive to a stage where we begin to shed the husk itself of what the reality has done. We've already identified that it's been doing things, the control systems, etc. And then now it's time to, shed off what they've done. And much of what they've done, especially when you notice the patterns, is really based on a point-to-point system. It's almost like old Gestapo days where somebody would snitch and tell that the other person was coming a little bit out of line. And then that kept everybody afraid of each other and also even untrusting of each other, because there was like the notion that, hey, if I express the wrong thing, though, this person could turn me in and even get a raise. You see what I mean? So this reality has been rife with some really extensive blockages to being able to be open and be in full expression. And because of that, and again, a numerous list of things that I've already detailed in the past, it has at times many parts of our personality, maybe not all of them, but many parts of our personality, rather recluse and constantly comparing itself to others. And in this way, others in the reality and what they've been able to achieve, to assess where we're at and who we are. And I'm here to tell you that such things could be, and in many times will be, a grave mistake. That you have to automatically come into the new spectrum realizing that you are less than 1% in your uniqueness to how similar you are to everything else. So I just want to clarify in every way. You know how they always say the 1%, and they use this term. Your uniqueness places you in the less than 1%. It puts several zeros in front of that. This means that when you try then to compare yourself to others around you, it's automatically lowering you. It's just an improper method. Even when I say, I'm going to base myself on, and then fill in the blank, someone else, another pattern. Basing puts you low. That's what base means. Now, again, I'm speaking directly to comparing oneself to others, and that you move into this new space and it's no longer feeling like that you haven't achieved that yet. Because we can always bring that specimen and bring that code, and I can show you in ways in where you've blown the numbers out on something that being hasn't even really started to dive into yet. You see what I mean? So this is always going to be the possibility for sure when you're dealing with something so unique as every mainframe that's here. So when society brings something in front of us that we should judge people by, this again leads to even the confusions that we've gained with each other. So for the record, I'm saying not only stop judging yourself based on others, I'm also saying in many ways, we have to take a moment, and I'm going to itemize this here, of examining this. There's like a ping pong game going on with judgment, right? And when you take the personality of the one that you feel is the better one, because a lot of times we do that in deflecting, we do that if we've been not taken care of, we do that if we've been ignored, we do that if we've been suppressed. So, and there's so many reasons why one would say, well, I'm better than this person. But then we'll gain an additional layer when religious ideas or goody two-shoe ideas or even namaste ideas come in play. Because it'll be like, I do this. Let me clarify this here. So it's like when you're apologizing for what you're doing. So it's like you're saying, you know what? I am better than everybody, but not in the egotistical way. You see what I mean? So it's like this thing that people back up what they're saying, and they'll say stuff like let's say, okay, so let me just go by my notes here. So many suffer from the lifestyle of debasement. Okay, so that's what we're getting at here. So there's a constant pressure, right? And then this pressure and debasement is like, this person is better than me, right? But then when you start rising above that debasement, there's always a excuse or a reason why you can now think a certain way. And then you make sure that everybody else doesn't think you're thinking the wrong way. And what I'm saying is this sends the consciousness into a dizzying spiral of never being able to realize the value within itself. Even for me talking about it, it sent me into a dizzying spiral. So this is something that we need to stay away from, to realize what you're dealing with right now in this reality. You're front and center as your own being. You're in command. And now you need to go in and analyze things based on who you are and how you operate. If you tangent to another less than 1% being, trying to compare yourself, especially in not a constructive way, to who they are and how they operate, you're off center and you're off point. That's as much as I'm going to say about that. This was that part of the build that is like, hey, make sure you build more of what some could perceive to be ego, some could perceive to be self-love. You see what I mean? It's like, oh man, I look so amazing, but not like in a conceited way. You see what I mean? Remove all of that, all those layers and all that stuff, and just dial into what it is that you are. See what I mean? So it's no reflection and comparison. Who am I? Well, let me see what everything else is to determine who I am. That's the old steps. Now it's simply you go in and you see self. This is how to shed the husk. The main thing that I want to dial into is not from, because we've discussed the word alien and we talk about it as being something foreign, and we get in deep into this, and this is all about how you continue to get the medicine. Who is the real alien here? Is it all the animals and insects and birds that we see running around? Or is it the humans? And the interesting part about this is that when we examine the world and we examine how it operates, like we examine nature and we examine the animals, we of course can even see some parts of us in animals. But then there's this huge gap. And the gap is almost like we went to the future and they didn't. And this is how we came back as, because of all that time, this is the technology, if you may. And then now we arrive. Does that make us the aliens? But then let's just insist on that, because I'm like, I don't know about that. But isn't like a common concept of the conscious community, and something that clearly must resonate some kind of truth to it, is that we're from the stars? Right? That they keep, we're always saying, hey man, we're from the stars. But aliens are from the stars, according to how we comprehend all of this stuff. You come from the stars and you come here, you're an alien. So what happens is that there's an entire compartment back here of reason. They call it the subconscious. It's the one that remembers pictures from kids that you played with as a child. And it's really making rational sense of everything that you've told it. And so in that way, this frontal processor just dealing with the reality and this momentary thinking that we do at times to perceive what's going on at the moment is nothing like what's actually happening, if you may, back here, and all the deep thinking that's going on from what we've already accepted. So again, are we the aliens or not in that respect? Because the only thing filling that in is us just saying we're humans on Earth. And then it kind of makes it feel like Humans are indigenous to Earth. That's all comes in: humans, animals, beetles, birds, right? But if I was, just look at to a little kid and I just said, with no indoctrination, circle the one here that doesn't fit. And I put an apple, I put a snake, and I put a tree, and then I put a human. You see what I mean? The kid would logically be like, this one, because you see what I mean? This is the only thing that it's not on that primary, if you may. So let's just keep going and just go with that awareness that for sure humans came from the stars, a part of us, okay? And now we enter in to the occultist aspect of all of this. So what happens when the spirit leaves the body for a prolonged period? What temperature does the body get? Obviously, he gets cold. So does this not insinuate that the spirit is hot then? You see what I mean? Because it's like just logical deduction. This means that a spirit is really like a fire to a certain degree. So let me just start here, and I'm going to copy the text of what I'm going to read from today because I've collaborated multiple files that I have to deduce certain levels of information to make it, much more clearer for us. Because again, this is occultism also. This means that we're going to talk about some pretty heavy stuff in relation to how it works because we don't want to cut any corners. Because literally, I was in the conversation with the guys. We're about to boot up God Love Money again as a podcast. And the direct question was asked is what is the pyramid? I asked that question, what is the pyramid anyway? And, there was this funny moment of space where it's almost like nobody had really completely defined definitively what the pyramids are. Just like in so many other aspects of occultism, nobody has really just smacked down the hammer and said, this is exactly what it is. Check. All right, let's get to the next stage. And when that can't happen, that means that we will constantly be in this disarray trying to figure out what's going on and not all agreeing. So it's also in this time, high time, 2025, because we also have the codes to the matrix, which means that if you're telling the truth about something, you should really be able to find it everywhere and have more examples of this. It wouldn't be just like something that you just made up. And then, of course, there's etymology and linguistics that also assist us in the process of actually figuring out what's going on in the code. And again, there's the awareness that we know for sure that there is a code being deployed and that the code does work. Meaning that, hey, we're looking at an entire reality, and this reality is built on linguistics, is built on symbols, is built on sound, and it is good, meaning that it's actually working. So it behooves us, again, to try to figure out how does it function. But such things are still in the mind of the adept. And the adept make up less than 1% of all the beings on the planet so far. Okay, so we have to start thinking again. So you're already 1% of 1% of 1%. Then when you become adept, you're 1% of 1% of 1%. Then when you live in a certain state, you become. So that's what I mean in the beginning by. So if you're ever trying to compare yourself to others, you're literally always moving in this 0.00001% of everything. So it would be bad to even compare to get to the next stage. Now, of course, the reality in itself has a feedback loop happening to keep everyone in pigeonholes and archetypes. But so I'm just introducing the next way of perceiving and utilizing the consciousness in order to be able to achieve the great things. And it's because when you can fully know you are the great thing, you attract all of the great things. Now, I don't want to make this like simple as like The Secret and the law of attraction. What I'm explaining is if you can shift your consciousness long enough into a lofty state and stay there, the things that the lofty state has as its environment automatically attract like a magnet to that person because it's like, oh, here's all your things, shrack. See what I mean? That's how this all works. When you stay in a field long enough, you will inherit what belongs to that field. Now, you can see this on the most lowest levels, too. Like if you're walking around, you got a knife in your pocket, you have stinking thinking, you're doing some drugs. that kind of vibration is going to attract what comes with that world. You see what I mean? So this is like just a common sense 101 of occultism, right? But those common sense 101 things starts getting deep. So as it's written here, we're just going to read this, that the seraphim, the non-human, serpent-like, fiery linked to Sirius, representing the controller, the upper house. So this is kind of paraphrased. So when we're into understanding this completely, what we understand is that the spirit itself really descends into this vessel. Okay. And there are spirits ad infinite. So in many ways, while there for sure are some Syrians here in the space and some who may have been mixed with Syrian or anything like that, there's other spaces to be mixed with. So in many ways, it's taking the core ancestral stories and realizing how the spiritual technology works and not just getting pigeonholed into that one thing, even though that one thing is there repetitively to make sure that you understand these secrets. Okay, so this is a secret in relation to Sirius and how a Syrian can come into a human body or descend into a human body and rule it from the upper house. Okay, and in this way, it is alien because what is known to be terrestrial is the lower house. As we'll read here, the sword carriers linked to Pleiades, representing man and the lower house, are two primary ruling classes of angels or high creatures originating from different star systems. Okay. Also, if you're not catching this, this is man and woman. So when this will like explode into even factions from 2025 and it's grossly debased from billions of years ago of a pattern, people will lose sight of that completely, that what we're talking about is we're talking about the masculine and we're talking about the feminine aspects of the vehicle, if you may. And when the masculine and feminine aspects of the vehicle are not balanced and in tune, the vehicle does not activate. But a non-activated vehicle is also equally as dangerous. In fact, an activated vehicle is more safer than a non-activated vehicle. Because when a non-activated vehicle is roaming within whatever plane it's lodged in, it's actually imbalanced in itself and causes imbalances because of its reflection. That's the story of the demiurge. So we're saying that this masculine and feminine form originated within the star systems, and their conflict and eventual covenant. This is like why we see man and woman coming together in a marriage, a holy marriage, because it's no different than spirit and flesh coming together. But in these oddities, there are many layers to it because, for instance, the Venusians, which can be seen as being more feminine, have mixed with the Martians, which are Madim or Adim, which can seem to be more male-like, because these cultures respectively function in two totally different ways. No different than at times when you see how men do things versus how women do things. You'd be like, man, we're coming from a totally different space. However, the covenant, which is called the dialectic, and this just means that any person would become the covenant or the dialectic because your parents, a masculine and feminine force, got together and brought you into existence. And in this way, in the old world, and you're going to know what I mean by when I'm saying the old world, because now we're in the new world. That's what the new world order is. But in the old world, you had the females basically handling the religious institutions or the priesthoods, but in this case, it was the priestesses and the covens and everything else to do with the angels. And I can show you the book, Wombs and Alien Spirits, because the spirits they're talking about, or the czar, are the quote unquote angels. So women handled that because it had everything to do with bringing in these entities into this space, because that is the covenant. And that's where this stuff starts getting really, really deep, because right away, not too many people are talking about this, especially in this kind of way. especially in a way that is us and not necessarily everything else that they want us to be afraid of, but totally just examining it from our ancient ancestors' time all the way up until now so we can understand and define what exactly happened and where things went awry. So as we continue, there then becomes this parallel society model. This parallel society model can still be seen in especially very strict Islam. This means that the women, they're over here and the men are over here, and they don't operate together except for when it's time to come together in marriage, or time to come together in ceremony, or time to come together in enjoyment. And we'll just put it like that. But you see what I mean? So other than that, the men and the women are not really together. And you can still see that in these cultures versus in the new cultures, in the new world, the men and women are like, they work together in the same workplace. They be punching each other. You know what I mean? Like there's all types of stuff that would never fly in the old world. Okay, so the old world has that feeling of strictness to it, has that feeling of ritualistic practices and beliefs, in which are never broken. If one breaks any of these rules, it is haram. That's, as it's called, a curse to do such things. Okay, so you need to understand how all of this is working and operating within this geometric matrix. So you can also make sense of what's also going on in the space and time. And then this, of course, gives you the ability to leapfrog, like to literally go beyond all of this, because you could see where the breakdowns of division often happen, because the system in itself is built on division. And this division later on becomes synonymous with death, because death is a cognate of the word die. And the die is just a word that means to split in that way, or to make two of, as in dice. So this is a realm. This is a reality. It's not going anywhere. It serves a purpose. And there's a lot to be learned, but it is a very mature path to understand such things. So I'll finish this. Their interaction led to the creation of the Adamic race, obviously. So even if I don't put this into such spooky context and take it away from it being humanity that we're talking about here, it's logical that our ancestors and whatever they did amounted to us being here. And hybrid just means now we have male and female operating in the same body, even partially on one field. Like, so I got a masculine and a feminine, but I'm masculine. You see what I mean? So we have this spirit, if you may, within us, and these energies and this DNA and all of what comes with that. It now becomes a part of our being and our existence. And this is the dialectic. This is the covenant. And this is how we became a part of, and actually not just part of, that this is how we became starfire. Let me keep going. We have then grafted bloodlines that often act as mediators or rulers on the earth. I would not at all take that into just thinking that it's the Illuminatis or whatever that we're talking about. That each person here, because the rulership is through illusion and secrets, is actually at the stage of being a ruler on earth because of the power that you already have and that you were already given. So let me read this to you very briefly. First of all, let's understand a little symbolism here. The old world was decapitated. Okay? And if you understand the old world and the major symbol of the old world, it is the pyramid. Okay? The pyramid in itself holds a special place in most people's mind. Like you could see it's almost like in itself a meme. And some stuff going on in the pyramid could get the whole world, academia, everything looking into trying to figure out a mystery that has already been decoded through math. And this mystery, of course, is how the pyramid is reinforcing not only the golden ratio, but basically the laws of pi and phi. Now, somebody will drill this topic, and I'm not going to be doing that today. But meaning that if you want to go find out how the Great Pyramid of Giza is designed encoding phi, there's dudes that will exhaust you with the math. And you just be like, okay, I believe you. But if you do the math yourself or have AI do the math, it's encoded within the pyramid, pi and phi, and the math, these mathematics. Okay? But there's something that I want you to understand, even if you're not good at math. And that is this statement. This ratio is fundamental to sacred geometry, appearing naturally in pentagrams and pentagons and the proportions of the pyramid. And that you deduce from that when you're seeing a pyramid, you're actually seeing the symbol of the pentagram. Okay? And this, to me, if one doesn't get this, they never become adept. And this is why there's so many people that it's like when we have 50 stars on a flag, I mean, that 50 is for sure Marduk. But those stars are like beings in themselves from the stars, if you may. The geometry of the body is sitting in this same star. Okay? So when you understand this symbol, you understand that they call this symbol the blazing star. And the reason for that is the same thing I was telling you earlier, is that if you remove the star, the body, it gets cold. It can't heat itself. And this became the mysteries of the flame. Basically, flaming beings, beings of fire. So let me just recap really quick here on how many times it's mentioned of fire being a way that these entities manifest. The seraphim are referred to as the highest order. They are flaming serpents, a serapha, a fire. The watchers appeared to Enoch like flaming fire, stepping on flames of fire. The angel Yahweh appeared in a flame in the midst of a bush. The bush burned with fire, but it wasn't consumed. The kabod, or spirit, was seen by the Israelites as like a devouring fire. The Ophanim wheels or the throne chariot streamed flaming fire from underneath. It was fire unfolding itself, shimmering and like enormous divine fireflies. Pur, P-U-R, means fire. It's linked to the Purim festival. The jinn are formed from a fire blood or a fat of an offering. The deity Tammuz was consecrated in fire. Now, I got a wall of this, by the way, just to prove the point that something's going on with the fire and the spirit. So right away, when you have something that's called pyramid, which means fire in the middle, as the word pyre, P-Y-R, is the old word for fire. It means fire. Let me just copy and paste something really briefly here. You can now put together, as I've taught so proficiently, in the patterns of the program, that the letter P, anytime it's used, always penetrates. As in all of these words that begin with P. It's so excessive in the language, it makes you have to take a look like, okay, so I can just deduce from this then that The P means to penetrate or to point or to poke. And in the life-giving process, that is a specific faculty to be able to poke. So then when we go to the symbols of power of antiquity, we find this P on the Cairo. Okay, so this is how it's pronounced. Like, I got to go back over all my recordings pronouncing this Chiro. Y'all was with me. In like 7, it's Cairo. That's how it's pronounced. But that makes it connect, because we're talking about something that happened in Egypt also before this becomes the symbol of the papacy. There goes another P word. And that the papacy in itself is the society of antiquity that has still pushed forward this agenda, okay, of the new world. But we're going to desist here for a minute because we're leading to this. We're trying to get to the understanding of why the pyramid penetrates everyone's consciousness as being important. So let's just deduce a few things now that we've already learned. So that the fire or fire inside is hinting towards that we very well are pyramids with, or pentagrams, or golden ratios, or golden doors, or phi. So you can use different terms to mean the same thing. But in the recess of us, there sits a light, a smokeless fire, if you may. And this part of us is then summarized as being our spirit. Now, we won't go on right now and talk about how then most societies of occultism are really designed to grow that. Like if you look at Kundalini yoga and any real, I'm talking about real societies of activation, is designed to grow Kundalini or to grow this fire force inside of you and learn how to weld it. Am I right or am I wrong? Let me just take a moment because I see some blank faces here and you know it. Let me clear my screens up. Let me get some people off my screen that just look like I'm lost my damn mind. Like, why are we talking about this? Is there anything other than this? It's more like, why haven't we been talking about this to be in this space and time in 2025? I would only say to get to the point that we can handle it, to understand that the spirits are the dragons or the seraph of fire, and that it's actually embedded within the human beings called Kundalini, and sitting down there as a small one being dominated by other much more larger ones. You see what I mean? It's so shriveled up and small and shrouded that it's not even aware of itself and its own power, and that the dominion would rather just keep it that way and make mythos around every single thing that is the truth, and to the point that we no longer believe it, and then we're totally lost within self in infinity? Never. It can't happen because we send transmissions deep across, like it would say, a space. That's just ignorance. We send transmissions across that, and then they ping on to, at times, those who can receive them that are lost in the void. So let's keep going about the burning man then, right? Because at this point, since we can deduce that this pyramid that's out here is actually a pentagram, thus a symbol of the body, we have a body standing out there waist deep. The largest symbol, if you may, or relic of a body, but it's a body of fire. So it's a burning man, if you may. And the reason why it's a man is because it's phallic. It's a penetration device. It's not a dome. You get it? You see, so the geometry dictates, as I was saying, by the straight line versus the curve, the geometry dictates what it is, not me. So this is a monument to man. Let's go forward with the occultism because, you know, we got to make sense of it. We're going to go through this slowly. The builders of the pyramids. Now, let's identify this first before we get into the builders of that pyramid. Because you need to understand that, and this is like a chicken or the egg thing right now, because I got to figure out which one to explain first. But in every respect, what the pyramids do is they create a space where, because a fire is coalescing in the 0 point, a smokeless fire, that becomes a medium in which what comes from the spiritual plane can interact with what is in the physical plane. Okay? And some will think that is just as like you go into a building like Stargate, and then only in the center of that building that portal is actually active. But no, what it literally is a rip in the fold of time, to where whatever can fit through that space in time can come through there. Okay, so that's why there's Nubian pyramids, and they're shaped different. They have different geometry. So they're pulling stuff from a different constellation or different star, if you may. Same thing in Angkor Wat. They move them with a different type of geometry. You see what I mean? And that temple can pull. And when I say pull, what it acts is a gateway and a resonator. And as long as there's a resonator, we can always ping on it. This is organic Wi-Fi. This is where Wi-Fi and the idea came from. All this brass, all this resonance, all this gold, all this resonance. But again, it's not just again, Stargate SG-1, there's a portal here. It allows a gateway to be in between our world and the other world of that level of resonance. So then that space can always emit whatever it's consecrated for. See what I mean? So if something has been consecrated to do something, it emits that energy. And here it does it at scale. So the only way to deactivate a pyramid burning man, which is actually a serpent with a fire inside, is to cut his head off. So that's why the capstone is removed. The capstone is the cutting off of those people that built those structures and their descendancies to the continuum or the stream of the old world, if you may. And the new world is upon us. But these old world relics are very useful because they have embedded systems already through geometry within the consciousness of the beings who reside within the fold. And now, if you think about the pentagram or the Great Pyramid, despite that many mountains may actually be pyramids, it is in itself one of the largest symbols of a pentagram. It is the largest symbol of a pentagram. Not to mention, as an addendum, old Nigerian tales of a pentagram falling from the sky, slamming into earth and embedding itself, and then asking to be worshipped through resonance, right? That's just in their annuals, jury's still out. But you need to understand this goes real deep, real fast. So building structures and crafting structures to be portals to resonate from the spiritual plane to the physical, nothing new. Your geometry, your math, your design is very particular for what it is that you're attracting. Okay? So when we talk about the pyramids, we can't then say, well, are all pyramids doing that? You need to know where it's been placed, right? Like this thing is pointing, those are pointing right up at Orion. You understand the technology, so you know it's drawing beings right from Orion. So in that way, you could go to another part of the world and deduce what's also going on there with some of the structures, right? So now let's just get an idea of the modern pyramid builders. The builders of the pyramids are identified as the Amu. These are the Westerners, the Asiatics, also referred to as harem, the mountain people. The Arabic word for the pyramid is harem, derived from the compound a harem or mountain people. a pyramid, harem, signifies the people of the altar, symbolically representing a mountain or a star affiliated with the angel king or the hunter Horus. So what happens is a structure is built to call down a entity. This entity is a hunter entity. This entity becomes later on known as the angel king. This construction is linked to offerings of the firstborn. So what is demanded from those who built this altar and their practice and their culture is to sacrifice their firstborn to this. It activates it. There is these underlining connotations of there being, and this is the disclaimer, occult level, kids hold your ear part, that this harem or haram is still to the extent of what you would know that word as today, that there were many virgins or women inside of it, and there were rituals taking place to create offspring of what was coming from that space, time, constellation, planet, whatever you want to call it. Okay? And this is what many people just seem to not want to remember anymore, that most of these religious structures were in themselves inhabited by priestesses who were cohabiting to bring more offspring for whatever it is that place was consecrated to. And in that way, as you can see, even then in Islamic, original Islam, which is about the body's stance, is this is a curse to do this kind of thing, to like have a place where you're going to be calling in spirits in. Okay. Now, let's back up here, because as I explained to you before, it's clear that the Tsar cult in Sudan was doing the same thing. So this practice of bringing in entities from other star systems, even though seeming like haram from this level, like forbidden, is still something that there's another group that it's not forbidden for them to do that. I need to make sure that that gets added there. So forbidden could be, in certain respect, to create imbalance, to create things that are abhorred, demonic, evil, this kind of thing. This could be the curse, not from like some God saying, hey, that's a curse, but from literally the activities that would come from that, which is the greatest judge. You see what I mean? You don't got to be sitting back there trying to figure out what's going on. You just need to see what came from it. What did they ultimately end up doing? Who did they become? So in this way, though, these pyramids specifically were consecrated towards bringing virgins to be defiled in that way. And the etymology is very replete in explaining, and let me just go through a little bit of it. You know, these are the uncomfortable topics, but this is the source of molestation. It's the reason why Mary is a virgin, but then becomes pregnant with Jesus. If you want to just find it directly. How does somebody become pregnant and there was no man? If we go on with the story, you know what I mean? And when you dig into that even deeper, you understand, oh, this is not new. A spirit came unto Mary, as it does say. They still trying to bring you close, but they drop you off somewhere to make you think, oh, it was no penetration happened, I guess. It was immaculate conception. It was all clean. Nothing happened. When these are ancient practices and they're just letting you in on a little bit so the occult know, oh yeah, they performing the same starfire rites. But then they're dealing with specific entities, and these entities are the ones that have the world in turmoil right now. These entities are the reason why humans have to wake up to their starfire power, because these entities are not allowed to be running anything. No different than the governors and the rulers of this world have seen fit to run anything. But now we get the whole story. So we go forward, and it's talking about the pyramids. They're as the harem or the harem. They're linked in this word harem, which often is a prohibited place associated with sexual seclusion. And also to the word haram, of course, meaning unlawful. And this immediately associates the pyramid structure with a prohibited place, potentially involving these sexual connotations. But this links to the Mount Hermon, which is spoken about in the same scriptures, where there's a cultic tradition on Mount Hermon about a rebellion of some angels that through mortal intercourse, okay, so remember, angels are seraphs. They're made of fire. But the spirits have mortal intercourse with, obviously, the women in this case. And it says the text further links the name of Hermon to the pun Aurman, meaning virgin sex. This directly connects the pyramid symbolism to sexual acts, especially involving virgins, between virgins and divine angelic beings. It goes further. Explicitly, this purpose of this pyramid serves as a type of royal chamber or angelic harem. So let's stop here. So this means that when it's functioning, you're in a chamber of entities when you enter into these structures. That's what they were originally designed for. Like when you walk in, it's resonating all over the place though, so you may hear it in your mind. But when you walk in, you've entered into the house. And in this house, only copulation is going on. And this is also even when you think about the Bacchanalia and you think about all these older snapshots of certain cults, you kind of get the bigger picture. But remember, what's going on in the matriarch, again, as we're catching remnants of it from the Tsar cult, is that there was extreme principles and practices that need to be placed around bringing beings, basically birthing. I'll just say it like that. The boats, bringing the boats to dock. That's the birth. You see what I mean? So this was only handled by the women. So what the pyramids stand for is men, more importantly, Martians, now doing it. And in this process also, they're doing it and they're creating imbalanced beings. Straight lines, not a lot of curves. They're using the words of power, but they're not using the starfire sometimes. That's later on. Early on, they're using the starfire, which we'll talk about later on what it actually is. They're using the starfire. And then but they're using it illegally. They got all these virgins around that have been taken from different tribes and different groups of people. I'm telling you that the pyramid, whichever one that is the one we're referring to here, whether that's Giza or not, or whether it's already crumbled completely, this was the tower. When they talk about that they were building a tower, yes, that tower consisted of language because humans are built on language. However, this specific tower, it was like, if this gets complete, it's going to mean the destruction of everything. So this means that, hey, more of that energy coming in, more of that distortion, more of that evil is going to destroy the whole world. So then the tower was, they say, and this is by the account of most occult archaeologists that have studied the pyramids of Giza specifically, that on one day, the sun showed so bright, it burned everything. It melted the rock. They say it came right up through the point. You know how they got like this point of Heliopolis and all that stuff. They said sun came right to the point and melted it all. And that was the end, if you may. That was that taking that pyramid offline. Now there's many things still deep in these mysteries, like why and who was it and what nations and who was involved. But the things that we need to focus on the most are the process, the energies, the geometries, the lessons. Because it goes on, because also this is not like something that is over. Like nothing really dies here. It just can get suppressed to a certain level, but now it's rampant again. And we find that there's this link, as it's speaking on here, between the harami as a word, because we're only going through etymology here, and a thief. It implies that the reptile or the angel represents sometimes the conqueror, a violator, and a thief. And this is often linked to forceful sexual activities. We'll just leave it that way. And so when we look into history, we can actually account that to being the formulation of so many of the future nations. That the women of our ancestry were forced into blending with the new forms that came. And that's as light as I can put it. And that was known in the occult. And that women were often protected all the time because of this. You see what I mean? Like there were certain consecrations. Like even with the idea of the woman keeping her hair covered and all this, is because the world was rife with these kind of entities moving around. And these things were known to attract them more. So this was a very lively part of human history that hasn't gone away. It just went behind the scenes. That's why all these, disclosures with Hollywood and even the president and all this kind of stuff, the Epstein and all this stuff it's a nasty undercurrent. The people who are being herded from one country to another as one country collapsed, and then they got all these refugees and the kids start getting pulled away and all this stuff, it's happening. It's very difficult to confront. I'd rather confront what to do about it. But it's very important that people also understand this stuff is embedded in this symbolism. It could be as simple as showing a specific pyramid. Not all the pyramids, but one pyramid specifically that has been consecrated because of where it's at. So where is it at? We're going to finish here. And then I'm going to talk about where is it at. So we go further and we find that this word, I'm just trying to only deduce things that we haven't talked about already. The pyramidal lion cloth is paired with the priest of Amoon, who is the Hyksos builder of the pyramids, who came in during the time of Akhenaten. So if you want to know when the New World Order came in, it was when Akhenaten came in. And then all of the symbolism around Akhenaten, how he got the fat stomach like he's with child, right? And then there's so much connection around that. And then of course, the biblical God Yahweh being connected to Akhenaten. Of course, Freemasonry leading all the way back to Akhenaten. You see what I mean? So there's lots of receipts that the cult of Amu, who actually came from the Asiatic Western areas, conquered the Egyptian Kemetan structure and then took the sciences and the knowledge that was there and constructed something so big that they became just synonymous with being known as the mountain people for this, how high this mountain was, and then began to channel and bring beings from that portal into this space, which then became known as the angels, and then set up the religions and structures in which we know when the gods were with man. You see what I mean? Because there's a time that's remarks like, hey, these beings, this God, this angels were actually here. So let's go forward with a little bit more of this. So we'll just say, where is it at? So this last line is that the Pharaoh's lion cough makes a shape or harem, or the royal harem is the propagation of human angelic lines and stars like Venus and Sirius. So also they mention how that the pyramids move their alignment. Okay? So this is another thing to look into. I don't want any of what I'm saying to be treated as just the last final conclusive of this. But it's on paper. It means, oh, the pyramids were once located and pointed towards this, and now they're pointing towards that. How do they move? Could it be the moon? Can you move the world with the moon? This is just another, you can't call it coincidence because it's math. And this is exactly how the Great Pyramid lines up to the size and the proportions of Earth, lines up to the size and proportions of the moon, lines up to the size of the capstone. And all of this can be calculated based on the angle. So it's not arbitrary. When the angle points, that's everything. Everything is about the angle. Eric can probably tell you more about this. But it's how the moment, because if sometimes when you're not good at math, you're like, a pyramid versus a cone versus a diamond versus what are we talking about? To make it very simple, if it was flat and laying on the ground, when we put it up on a certain angle, the angle we put it up on at is either going to be in tune or it's not. And when it's in tune, it does this. And stuff like this is why it's not inconclusive. It's conclusive that whoever built the pyramids and whatever put the moon out there, it seemed to already know how to scale the earth, like it had measured the earth. And the interesting part about even the Rabbi Akiba's work on the descenders of the chariot, which is, of course, the Merkaba, the whole goal of the descent is to be able to measure the body of God. That's what they're attempting to do. And that's what leaves everybody in this okay, what does that mean? Why are the Kabbalists so infatuated with measuring the body of God? And this is why. Because when you have the geometry and you have the angle, then you have the resonators. And I'm going to break this down really, really simple here in a moment, just in case you're feeling like, hey, a little bit too much math for me. But I'm going to break this down for sure. But you need to understand that this is on purpose. So in itself, the pyramid as a symbol, it stands for different things. And this is how symbols can speak to a person volumes. Because it's, of course, the burning man. It's a monument to man. It's also a monument of man, quote unquote, interacting with woman, or angel interacting with woman, because let's just face it at this point, guys. Man is a byproduct, as we know on the planet, of woman. The first intercessor, if you may, is a starfire angel. And that's the process. So we get men and women on earth because starfire went into a woman's womb. And this is finally why I should just go ahead and define, what does starfire mean? Again, the other X-rated part of the conversation, it is menstrual blood. There's some type of secret that allows this process to happen that could not happen without woman, because she has this component. Now that's kind of obvious, right? Because if there can't be, you can't bring anybody into the world if you don't have a woman, right? But that goes way more deeper than most people think. It's not just the woman, it's the blood she can produce. Let me show you. Second. As I said, it was going to be an extremely close show, but I'm really tired of seeing people fumbling around. It's just like they're going backwards out there, y'all. Like, we got to get out there and, shape it up a little bit if we're going to make this mission. But listen, menstrual blood, first of all, it doesn't move through like veins and arteries like the blood that we know. It only moves in the uterus, and it then it says the endometrial shedding. Okay? So listen, whether you learn this now or in 1,000 years, there are entities themselves that they're the shed of other powerful entities that you would deem as female wombs. Okay? They're even saying like the archons, even what you call the grays. All these are sheds, or shaddai was the word. It meant a shadow or a shade. So apparently, and this is high level occult stuff, this is the cult of Kamar. That basically the moon, because it governs the menstrual cycle, it also governs the birth process of a shed. And that every time a woman has her menstruation cycle, one of them are born. Okay? This is the deepest level of occult. Like, the shed from a woman's cycle births a being in itself. Now, if that being happens to find a mate, it becomes like the human being in the physical reality. But as all women know, not all cycles of the egg, as we just call it. Look how it's like right there in front of everybody's face. Look, woman has an egg, but we always talk about ruling from the egg, right? Remember? University semester 2, ruling from the egg, that the entity is alive inside of the egg. So woman's got an entity every month. But then this makes up like the highest level of occult, because for obvious reasons. You see what I mean? Like, who knows if every potential of all of this has been fully explored, but that is what occultism is. But you can already see, though, this is not something that most people are going to be getting their heads or hands into at all. You just couldn't get your mind around it. And as long as for sure they continue to suppress the woman and never let her know what's going on either, everybody will be lost. This is how it works. But there's a logical deduction here that somehow the moon has something to do with this, and it does. But in itself, the moon is an occultation process. It itself is penetrating and creating whatever the lunar entities actually are, which could be the basis. Like, basically, coming forth by day could be a shadow now coming into the light to gain flesh. You see what I mean? This is what you would find in deep levels of physics. But it starts somewhere first. It starts in the darkness. It starts in the shade. And then when you give it life or light, then it animates. You see what I mean? So these are the basic fundamentals, and we're like trying to explain this now, right? But they was doing it. So the color is different. Dark red to brown. It does not clot. And this is what gets into, like, again, in these societies, this is where the idea of the vampire comes in. People were thinking like, hey, these vampires are sucking on people's neck and stuff. And that was a part of the mythos. The whole thing came from starfire. And that the alkalinity, that basically, let me just stop beating around the bush, that the beings needed to drink this stuff to live from the priestesses. Facts. If it takes you 1,000 years or you learn it today. So they were cultivating it. You see what I mean? It gave them life to consume it. And because our blood clots. So it would be like, if you drink it, it would probably like lock up a vampire's throat. You know what I mean? This is not what you drink. This is like poison blood. It's like rat blood. You can't drink that kind of blood and expect to have the same results. So I'm just letting you understand why it then became like so crazy with the suppressing the women and using them and selling them, and that they became the first money, and they became like the root to the whole marriage thing, and how the marriage thing is more deeper in Islam than it is anywhere else as far as occult practices. They're sacrificing a goat on the marriage day. The father gives away his daughter to this man for a price. He has to pay the dowry. So it's all written all over it, ladies and gentlemen, of explaining basically that there became a practice of selling women to these entities to produce offspring, and all types of madness going on. So let me just read through this. Because it's important, again, that you have all the etymology, you have all the documentation, in fact. That way it's not refutable. You know, at this stage, you know, even going through these kind of things and knowing that they're factual and knowing how it's affecting people to not know about such things. Wow. Like, imagine being on that charge. Meaning, imagine being on that watch. Imagine being in a reality where this kind of stuff is going on, and it's clearly happening for us in a way where it's happening behind the scenes. Nobody knows anything about it. Nobody knows what's going on. Let's keep going through this. So the Holocaustum, which is the burnt offering, it involves fire. This is when they shoot a nuke. The seraphim are described as a fiery species. They are jinn. They are smokeless fire. They appear stepping on flames of fire. Now remember, you have one too, and this is why it gets a little sticky. This is why there was forces of good and forces of evil. You had those who would consume and burn up and flame out or become inflamed. And you had those that taught how to control the fire, how to control the dragon, how to control the kundalini. We have, because of this vehicle, as we showed before, this field spinning around the body, whether it's a baby Dyson or full-blown Ophanim. This is the graduation. The graduation even happens mentally. Like, I found myself, like, right before I was about to jump into the show, I'm just been in different gears. Like, it's been a wild week for me, like all types of stuff going on, all positive and some balance. We'll put it that way. That creates a surplus. But there's a lot of stuff going on. So I enter into the space, I'm in a whole different vibration. And I'm like, kind of internally smacking myself like, yo, okay, it's time to do tribe vibes. We got the notes, everything is together, but what's up with you? I don't feel the frequency. And it was like, dial in. And what that feels like, because it's not a look, it's just I take a moment and I just turn on. I can't even talk about how it happens. I just start connecting to it, and it moves all through me. It makes me shiver and shudder and feel like fuzzy. And then it kind of like, it makes my fingers tingle to the tips, like I'm being filled, like I'm coming in and stepping into the process. And in that way, I feel refreshed, and I'm like, okay, great, let's go. So in that way, I can see how, like, the superhero thing where you turn it on and you turn it off, that's really what it's more symbolic at, because when it's not being used, it's just like dormant, and you're even in a dumb state, kind of. Like, you're in, we won't make any fun of anybody. We'll just say you're kind of in like chill mode, right? You're not even really tuning in. But then when you turn it on, for whatever reason, it fills you. And whatever kind of person you are, that's what it's amplifying. So for me, I come into the space, and then I'm like, let's dial in, let's deliver this message. Let's get on point. So again, occultism, this fire star, which is menstrual blood, signifies a hidden tradition connected to the seraphim. We now know what that tradition is. This is called the serpent's burning venom seed. They didn't spare any. The gloves came off on that one. That was going to be that's the hardest core word for today. Because when an angel or an or a seraph impregnates a woman, it impregnates her with a burning seed, if you may. Because the seed is going to create a fire. It's going to create a fire star, right? So if the seed is fire, when it grows up, what's it going to be? It's going to be a fire. And that's what you need to understand was the relationship between the reptile, quote unquote, the old dragon mother's drama, okay, and us. That's why it shows you clearly that the cherubim, that they call them the sword carriers, were more related to men versus the seraphim, which are clearly Venusian, have everything to do with Venus, have everything to do with the concave and a serpent's eye, that was the feminine, okay? But later on, seraphim and cherubim, conflicts, disputes, imbalances become Luciferian, which is Lucifer is Venus, the morning star, and you can say Martian, you can say you can't really say Saturnalian. It always sticks out as that something's incorrect about that. But from a Martian level, yes. So you have the men on Mars and the women on Venus thing, but not necessarily explaining to you how you got both of them and how you got in this situation in the first place. So let's just take a moment for that. It's like, yo, so how did I get into this situation in the first place? Like, what is going on here? You see what I mean? Like, I just like a little Range Rover and, maybe some, what I mean? It's like you go from literally like the basic way that the world runs to look what's going on behind the scenes. And as I said, it's like the Eddie Murphy movie when he snatched the thing and then the serpent woman was like, he was like, oh shit. But I kid you not, though, that movie is on point in so many ways, The Golden Child. Let's take a moment. Let me just go get some water real quick. Let me refresh. I still have more here. I need to get through it. But remember Saddam Numspar? He go into the meditation. The whole wall goes back, pulls back. They got the entities in the lower world telling them what to do. They got the golden child there. They're trying to make it drink this defiled blood. Like all this kind of stuff is like, they fictionalize this. And then as I said, Eddie Murphy is always the donkey. He's always been the ass. Like look at him since the beginning. There was one film, it was 48 Hours. He's this is the laugh. He plays the donkey in Shrek. You see what I mean? This is the ass. It's the cult of the ass. Two interlacing pyramids without any circles around them. You need to question that symbol in itself. It's not a funkendating symbol. It's a completely masculine symbol with straight line pyramids. And that's why I always say, when you don't know the difference between a circle and a curve, because the ancient secrets lie within, when you see the pentagram, it has curves. It's not the straight line one you're seeing. When you see the hexagram, it has curves, which makes a torus field. It's not the straight line Star David that you're seeing. The straight line Star David is a symbol of the pyramids. Anything straight line is a symbol of the Abrahamic priestcraft. That's the difference, and it's so slight. You've had so many beings who they inspired to greatness. They wanted the magic. And then they went into these covens and cults that are, of course, got Overwatch on them. The detail is high. Anybody who breaks the fold, listen to what I'm saying. Anyone who breaks the fold, what you call a breakthrough, they show interest in. Because what a breakthrough is literally is that this is an entire illusion around us that we're wrapped around, and it's designed this way to keep us from being aware of who and what we are. So that moment that you start thinking you're greater and you know more and you're connected to something, you're breaking the fold. So literally what you're doing is just like, it lights up in everything. It's like something that can be monitored or watched. You can watch the whole world from their lights. Like if everyone here is a star, when you see a star shine really, really bright, that person activate. They just basically lighted the star from within, but that's not the end of the journey. There's no end. So you can imagine how many people lit up, and then the watchers, mainly the negative ones, they say there's agreeables and disagreeables, but the watchers look and they seek then to manipulate that person based on their levels of awareness and their levels of protection and guidance. And this is why with many, they would want to manipulate them, but they can't. And this is why you're sitting here now. That's exactly 1,000% what's happening. They can't manipulate you because you have guardians and guides. That's what protects you from that. They're spinning around you like a cherubim going around the garden, preventing things from getting in. But this is also why you have to protect children. Because in many ways, many of these children, their protection is still not strong enough. So that field around your body is alive. It is something. It's not just like you see what I mean? If a person doesn't have the spirit in them, they can't really express it in this way. They only be like, yo, it's two circumambulating lines of light. No, my friend, that's just what you're seeing from your perspective. This is so much more. This is a full active field. It's hyper intelligent. It's interlinked. It's like what they keep trying to create. They're like trying to create the closest they're getting is an all-in-one app at this point. But it's like a suit that there is really no limit to what the suit can do for you, right? So let's get through this. I don't want to at all dissolve any of this in theatrics because there's some hard-coded stuff. So let's go on. Imperious. This is heaven. The word imperious means heaven, and it means of the fire, associating the divine realm and the origin of the star Sirius with fire. The dual nature, creative and destructive. Boy, that hit it right there. While linked to divine glory and creation via the spirit and the light, the fire also appears in the context of judgments and flashing and fire and smoke and potential destruction. Like Jim burning houses. You see what I mean? So it lets you know, hey, this is why you're often not hearing about the good ones and you feel like all of them are evil. And it's because only the people who seem to know about this, like a lot of them, are already wired towards greediness, gluttony, hurting people, dominant, because they have their own occultation, and it's through bloodline in many ways, meaning that if the entity moved into the family 5-10 generations ago, the pact was that the entity was going to get these different kids coming in the future. That's what the pacts are. So it's not like, because some people see it the wrong way. They're like, well, see, that's what the Illuminati have protection. They have like the Rockefeller family has protection with these spirits. If you're talking about this, it's like, no, stupid. The spirits want to get paid back. And they've been given all the children of the Rockefellers, and they're enforcing that. And so when they walking around, it's already in their mind, like Venom, as they show them in the movie. You see what I mean? So remember, this seed, this fire seeds, there's different kind of seeds. This one is a cobra seed, by the way, because they're very specific in mentioning that this is a cobra, one of the cobras. Shit, call G.I. Joe. So check it out. So the origins of the identity of Amoon, which means hidden. The Egyptian deity Amoon is identified as the ancient Egyptian god, particularly the local god of Thebes. Okay, so this is around Akhenaten time in Thebes, where we get the word thieves from, to steal, for obvious reason. It says, whose worship later extended to Greece as Zeus Ammon, and then Rome as Jupiter Ammon. Okay? This is what the cult of Amoon means. This is what the cult of the hidden means. Now, I know his name. His name is Am. A-M. He does come from the tribe of America. But actually, he comes from the tribe of Erech, which is E-R-E-C-H. That is his Ka. The great I am. People missed it. It's like, that is his name. It's backwards to Ma. So Amram and all of that, you know, because it goes deep into Am. But just so you know his name, like I said, now the children and the descendants are here, right? So if you go pointing fingers, you're going to be pointing them at yourself, like, especially for us Americans. But it is important that you should know America is named after this deity. His name is I Am. But more importantly, he's telling you, yo, I'm Am. What is his name again? We lost his name. These dudes, they can't, they're thick. He's saying, yo, I am. That is my name. I don't know what else to say. And I'm saying this in a funny way because everybody knows that it follows the tradition that supposedly we don't know what the name is, but we've already defined what the name means, but nobody is taking it as serious, as in Ham, H-A-M. But the H is silent. Let's explain it. Despite the Theban association, the documents propose that Amoon originated in Babylon and is linked to the Amorites and the Amu and Hammurabi. Okay, so this is not just the mystical, we can't trace anybody around down to Wikipedia like Moses. It's Hammurabi. Okay. Am for short. The H is silent. Hammurabi. Okay. It suggests it wasn't indigenous to Egypt. Hammurabi's name is interpreted as the rabbi of Amu. And in Egyptian, Amnuabi. Let me paste it for you. In Egyptian, the god Amaru associated with Hammurabi's nation is considered interchangeable with Amun. His capital might have been Haran in Syria. He's linked to the Amorite patriarch Lot. So, of course, some of those beefs that y'all see going on is like the Moses versus Lot beef. And these beefs are so internally crazy, you would never even understand it anyway. But that's what I was saying. They beef in their own ranks. But when it comes against the humans who don't know, the Muggles, the Goyim, etc., they're all on the same side against you. How, like, put like a, or they want to be. Let's just put it that way. Let's deflect that. So the hidden god Amun's name means hidden. It is depicted as a hidden god associated with water and concealment in the West. This massing of his origins is noted as integral to his deification. The sodalists fraternity is linked to the Amoon concealment. His symbolism is a ram, right? We call it the goat now, but that's like a watered down version of a ram, right? Like in the beginning, it was all a ram. Amoon is referred to and represented as a ram and sometime an amphibious ram. So like a ram with a tail. The ram insignia signifies his paradox of concealment in nature. Horus's face markings are said to be a silhouette of the ram's horned profile. We've seen that glyph before. You turn Horus to the side and it looks like a face of a ram. Alexander the Great, as Amoon, was depicted as having Amon's horns. Okay? Remember Alexander the Great, or dual quarnane, which means the great two horn. And this is also when you see Moses with horns, we're talking about the same person, same cult. But the unfortunate part is they got everybody confused because you don't know the difference between the old world and the new world. So now the new world, again, the symbol is a being with horns, as Moses is seen in every depiction of Moses. Go Google it. We showed it already, as having two pointing things on the top of his head. And then connecting Moses with Akhenaten and the escape from Egypt and monotheism, and you have your recipe. The crescent moon is the symbol. To the west, in Hammurabi worship as the moon, or Kamar, is tied to the priesthood of Comer and Amoon. Water is equated to being a hidden god, the house of water, Ea, the moonfish. And by the way, I have deduced this from at least 20 books that, except for Pierre's work, didn't speak on these things collectively. So this is the power of having those language models as like, okay, let's just put all this together. Let's put all the similarities together. A variation is linked to this ram god Amoon or Amon and the Masons who work with the goat god, who's really a ram, who's really, you see the layers? So this is a death cult. These priests of Amoon, they form a death cult and they're focused on the resurrection of Osiris. So remember, Osiris is the phallus symbol. To basically procreate using man as the medium of procreation. So there is no control that the woman has in the process. When she's used in a defiling way. And the cult itself is distorted masculine, inversion. Okay? So his worship involves this sacrifice of this ram, which I was saying that when there's a marriage in Islam now, they sacrifice the ram. It's replaced oftenly with a child in this cult, because Abraham's covenant and the ram sacrifice were covertly linked to Amoon worship. And the ram sacrifice is aligned with the mysteries of Amoon. All traditions where there is a sacrifice of the firstborn relate to the cult, the hidden cult of Amoon. These occult rites were hidden, just so you get it. This is why it's like, it's always deep state kind of crazy stuff when you start talking about this, because it is the most hidden thing you can think of. So this is the nocturnal priestcraft of the moon. It revolves around the risen lamb Amoon through necromancy and the ascendant hawk Horus. Okay, so when they're saying, hey, there's some deep rites in this, you can see how deep it goes. And again, the replacement of one for the other, before the replacement was with the ram. That's what it also talks about in the book, that even through the marriage process and then through the actual copulation process, when the male inseminates the female, a ram is sacrificed. And then the entity that has entered into the female, when the ram is sacrificed, goes into the ram. No, actually, when a ram is brought into the room, when a ram is brought into the room, a fertile ram, the spirit wanting more to be with the fertile ram than with the woman removes itself from the woman and goes into the ram, and then the woman that is, because they have the Hofriati women who have charge over this ritual, then slit the ram's throat, thus releasing the spirit through the neck of the ram back into the stars. So do you see why this wasn't something that everybody was doing? Like, imagine going to work after this. Just understand what I'm saying. This is why when they can say, hey, man, there's deeper secrets with the woman, and those secrets will never be revealed because nobody has ever lifted the veil of the woman. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about how we got here in the first place, and even how to bring other spirits and entities here. And then also that every person here, there has been some kind of, whether they know it or not, arrangement around their birth. Okay? So we'll finish this here. The Thieven connection of Amoon Nawabi, the priest of Amoon and the Rabbi Amun. The Thebes was considered as Amun's capital. This is the Theban priesthood. Okay, now remember, all secret societies, their great-great-granddaddy is the Theban priesthood. Okay, they're probably not even doing it right anymore. But that's where it all was centered in. And this was symbolized by a cobra, which is called a Theban. T-E-A-B-A-N. That's what the word means. Theban is a cobra. It was nominal of Amun. However, his true capital may have been elsewhere in Haran. The Akkadians, the Kadame, are created with seeding Thebes and are credited with seeding Thebes with Amun worship. Amun is strongly associated with the Western priesthood, encompassing gods like Amu, the Amorites, Martu, Mada, the Arabs, and the rabbis. Because remember, this is the cult of Abraham. And this is why I told people years ago, stay away from this stuff. I can't tell you how bad it is. When I was on the astral plane, it was madness. There was always skirmishes and wars. You wouldn't perceive your idea of a god to be anything like what was being carried out. They were even racist in that way, meaning that sexist, racist, whatever you want to call it, they would exterminate entire tribes, just like you see in the Bible, without a care of if it was a woman or a man or whatever, just like you're seeing in Gaza. These are the entities. This is a real thing. It's already recorded. This is the sodalist link, the sodalist fraternity, which is the Zodok. Okay? This is why you get this zodiac, right? Because these are the tribe. This is the Zodoks and the masters of the zodiac, who are called the Sadducees. Right? These are the characters that arrive in the Bible, and then now they got them beefing with Jesus to create all this delusion that any of the stuff that they're showing you, you should be practicing. But the Sadducees were beefing with Jesus, and they were the tribe of Zodok. So the priestcraft was right there, knowing how to read the stars. That's why they sent the Magi, who is now MAGA. So shit just keeps rotating, and it degrades. So you don't even get this good frankincense smell anymore. It's just right to the abuse. It's just somebody hitting the prompt to AI saying, what can we create to benefit businesses and governments and religions, we'll throw them in there too, but hurt people. Bloop, 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 bloop. Tariffs. Ding, 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 ding. I love this AI. So smart because I'm so dumb. But literally strategies to hurt only us, but empower their systems. Because the big corps, they're going to get bigger. They're going to buy up all the small corps. The governments, they love the confusion. They just need the technology to manage it. And then the price squeeze starts happening. People even start forgetting about, how connected we are. So they either remember or forget. Like right now, they're remembering. They all out there like, yo, we need to get together. I don't care. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you lost your job. I don't care if you're disabled. I don't care if you lost your 401k. I don't care if you just decrease your amount of Ethereum by half. We all together. You see what I mean? Because it's all matrix-based stuff. You see what I mean? So they're finding their common ground. But meanwhile, remember, like, what I'm explaining to you right now is the top of the mountain. And that's why I'm coming to you. It's like, look, but remember, they're down there and they think all this stuff has to do with the president. But they don't realize this shit's coming from on high, if you may. And now we got to scale Mount Meru. Like, basically, like, we need to get to the front of the plane into where they're flying it at and remove whoever is in there. Because right now, everybody in the back of the plane or the dimension, they don't even understand it. That's where you would need to go in order to change the flight, because this is what's happening. So then imagine going and explaining this. Well, let me tell you about the starfire. You need layers of education and metaphysics for this to be like, nah, he's on one for sure. I'm worried about him, really. I think he's maybe. You see what I mean? That's all most people can really get out of this. It's too deep. They drown in this. But you're living it every single day. And now you're just saying, okay, now I know exactly what I'm seeing. So let me finish this. So, because this is all the encoding. Okay, because remember, they rule through illusion. It's like glass to a bird. Ever seen a bird hit glass? It's like, what the fuck just happened? The bird is clueless to what's going on. Has no concept of what glass is. I'm going to show you how this connects with the geometry. So, objectives and significance. The hidden god Amoon represents the concept of concealment and hidden divinity, right? So this secret society thing, this is it. It loves this. Its true nature and origins are always masked. Death and resurrection. It's central to his cult. In this veneration of death, linked to Osiris, and the resurrection and the renewal, it often symbolized through this kind of sacrificing process. Like, you're going to live again. And ideas that, if you sacrifice your life now or something else, then you'll get something better. Yet that has not been disclosed to you what that is, because it remains hidden. That's how it operates. So it operates on a trust that's often a double cross. He represents a Western priesthood, a power structure potentially originating from Babylonian and Syria, like later imposed on and integrated with Egypt. The connection to the moon and the night. There's an association with the crescent rune and the moon god Kamar Sin and the nocturnal priestcraft. Duality and paradox. He has a symbol like a ram insignia of Horus, depicted as a paradoxical nature revealing through concealment. He is linked to cunning or kabis. The cult influenced significantly historical figures like Akhenaten and Alexander the Great, the priesthoods of the Western craft, the Thebans, and the Judaic via the Judaic and the Judaism via Abraham and Lot. We're finishing here. I got to make sure I get these codes out. Establishing the intent. So, the ruling class of the seraphim and the cherubim and other entities. Okay, no. This we can't go into. This has to be preserved for another time, because I was then able to itemize over 50 names of entities that surround this cult. So I'll put that inside of the notes, because it was like a Wikipedia breakdown of every single entity. I was able to accomplish that. But right now, I want to read this to you so you can see the framework as it is as far as ushering in the new world. Well, actually, before we do that, let's do this. So some may ask themselves, well, what power does this geometry have? I don't see it. I mean, here's a pentagram right here on the ground. What does it do? How much power does it have? Here's a hexagram here on the flag. What does it do? Even with the flower of life. What does it do? How does it do it? I don't see it. I will have to only explain to you to look around you and everything that has been created, from wonder weapons to nanofibers to formulas and medical cocktails that do displace age, time, and all types of things, is what this geometry is made of and does and is about. So first, let me just let you know from a rudimentary level and ramp up from there, or actually vice versa, just how much these symbols are used. So when we're talking about the geometry within the pyramid, pi, this is necessary for these processes. One, mechanical gears and rotary machines. Using pi to calculate rotation, you calculate torque, gear ratios, and rotations. So if you don't know this math, well, we'll just speak on if you do know it. You now start the process of being able to create clocks and to be able to create ultimately what becomes engines. You have the foundation for clocks, engines, robots, essentially, but human-made when you know this geometry. It converts a circular motion into usable work. That's what pi's role is. Architecture and geometry. This appears in domes, arches, sacred structures, including the pyramid, even the spacing of the columns. This also shapes the human civilization's visual and physical landscape. Okay, so this is where we begin with how the code embeds and penetrates everything into a point where people can't see the code anymore. I need to take a quick moment because I need to share an image. Okay, getting message to turn off a video. Is something running in the background? Oh, maybe that was earlier. Okay. See here. I'm just going to take a moment and just make sure everything is clear. You know, get a thumbs up, because I definitely don't want to be over here, you know, delivering the magnum opus and I'm on mute. So let's just do a quick sound check. If you can give me a thumbs up, physical one. Okay, great, great. I just want to send this one image. So when we're talking about this, we can really just dial in specifically, because what I want to do specifically is also demystify all doubt. Like anybody that I don't like to be the person that is talking about something where people are wondering if something's going on with me. So that's why I always love to bring all of the receipts, especially when we're even talking about the highest level of mystical things, so that you can see what I'm talking about completely. And so what I want you to do is I want you to take a moment and do yourself a favor. And when you see this, simply, so what we're showing here is that while the one on the bottom does look like it's brighter to you and the one on top is darker, they're actually the same color. When you put your finger in the middle and just basically block the white line, and then now look at how it looks, you could accomplish that on your side, you'll see that they're both the same color, right? So what we're talking about here with the masters of the waveform, because this is the term, is that this is child's play, of course, what I'm showing you right now. But this is exactly the hingings of a lot of the I'm here, but you can't see me nature of these entities and their reality. Our eyes are tuned in a strange way. And what this does, I'll drop this also in the chat. And what this does is it leaves literally a blind spot. And they operate in that blind spot. And what certain training is also about in occultism is actually removing that blind spot from your own visual perception. But, you know, fair warning should come around that. It's kind of like, remember that movie with Keanu Reeves? And he was playing the lawyer, devil's advocate. The world rapidly begins to turn into that. So it's not necessarily something for the faint-hearted to always see what's going on. It's like when you hit the club, if you could see all the entities there, you wouldn't go. It would be a wrap. So this is why we talk about that their biggest power is the cloak. And then, of course, the dagger to stab you in the back. But the reality is that the cloak means the illusion. You can't see them unless you're tuned. And there's different ways to tune. Some say there's even glasses, like they live. Some have said, this was coming from the Orient, that they had created a device to shatter the reality. And that's what the whole thing that happened. Remember, they was in Miami and they were like, they had an alien walk out of the portal in the mall and everybody saw it. And there were like 200 cop cars all around. Oh, we forgot about that, huh? Trump's here. Cats forgot about all that. But think about in that story, remember we read that some kids came in that looked like taggers and break dancers and they were Asian, but they had this box. And when they turn on the box, the dude was like, show them, show everybody, show everybody. He turned it on and it basically broke what this is called. That's what I was saying earlier. This is called basically piercing the illusion. And then as Pierre also mentions with some people who had encounters, the reality seems to like warp for a moment, like it's made out of water. And then there's sometimes notice things that don't really like merge well with how our physics work. That's called dimensional displacement. Then we get a temporal displacement. That means that time then seems to be altered in some way, shape, or form. Like the event seemed very short, but lasted for a very long time. This kind of thing. You see what I mean? That's what dimensions and realities are. Their time, their space, their sound, and mainly our perception of time, space, and sound. Like how long does it take for a sound to travel to you? Do you hear the sound the moment it's made? No. Even from a long distance away, somebody can say it, but if you don't have the cone to perceive it, you can't hear it. So when you're activating certain senses, you're just basically tuning in to where there's no delay, there's no interruptions, and there's no static in between you and that perception and that ability. So you collapse laws of thermodynamics. I need to get this, push this out to get this back. You collapse all of these hard-coded matrix frameworks. And as I said, there is an alert that goes off when that happens. It can happen in a person's mind. It can happen around them. And this is why I was saying when it happened to me, there was a detail. They didn't touch me. They didn't harm me, but they showed up and they looked reptilian to me. But if you did not you could pass them off for general Caucasian men. But if you just had a little bit more perception, you would have noticed the one in front was taller, the two that were filed in behind. You would have noticed the hive mind type of nature and that they all had a tendency to have more of like a kind of like a diamond shaped kind of cobra kind of head, but still with a real physical man's face on top. You see what I mean? So, I mean, again, these could be people just born in our world, but one thing or another, they end up becoming a part of this organization, and then they end up becoming like MIB or whatever, whoever does the detail, right? But they also figure out in that process that they directly connect genetically to and are closer to more of what the controllers are really about, which is generally about some level of oppression and policing and compartmentalization, right? Even with the seraphimic and the gubernatorial, the seraphimic and the cherubic being separated within the priesthood and the spiritual and the gubernatorial, meaning that there is supposedly a separation between the governments and the spiritual reality, right? The religions, the governments and the religion. But those are the two ruling factions because they rule through the government and then they rule through religions. And the religions are the ones that are cooking up things like the Mormons and things like the Handmaid's Tale and things like all of these weird, demented, sexually suppressive kind of abusive realities like Jim Jones's camp and cults and all that kind of stuff, because that all rolls underneath these entities. And that's why every time you see these dudes getting up, oh, I'm Lord Maitreya, blah, 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 they always have these entities moving around, Sai Baba and all these people. They have these entities moving around, hurting the children, doing things to the innocent people, abusing the women. You see what I mean? Driving the men into doing wild, crazy stuff. You see, it's all sick. Because it's haram. The calculation doesn't work. It's off center. It's off balance. So it produces distortions. So let's keep going though, because the perfection of this knowledge also unlocks the waveform and sound. This is sine waves. Pierre took a personal point in his new book to mention about the construct and sound waves, or sine waves, themselves, and how that operates inside of a frequency. And man, the other day, I was talking to this engineer who was working on the solar system, and he was like, never flip this button. And I was like, what does it do? And he was like, well, because that system is not needed, it's gonna put sine waves into the system that don't match the system. And I'm like, really? Like how? And he says, well, you know that electricity is oscillating at a certain rate, and that's a sine wave. And I was like, okay, I get it. He said, but then that has to be synchronized within a system in order for the system to not melt or not produce the kind of power that needs to be produced. So when you have something that's out of alignment, it does either one or the other. And this is what you learn as electrical engineer, right? Well, I wish I had that degree, boy. If I knew electrical engineering, I could tell y'all I could build a device to decompress the entire wavelength, because those kind of things as a spiritualist is like, okay, I get it. So if they can warp the wave, if they can control the wave, and they can use the sound, they can use the radio, they can use the electrical signals. Let me give you all of these, by the way, now, so you can ponder these, because all of these things that I'm mentioning all can be gathered, if you may. I'm pasting this in the chat right now. This will, of course, be in the notes. And this is basically if the geometry inside the pyramid reveals this. You can do this if you know the geometry, and this is the backbone to our reality of how the geometry connects in with what we are. Human anatomy. The structure of DNA, the shape of the eye, and the rhythm of the heart has this relationship. It literally encodes how our bodies and senses function. Okay? So this is why a master of the waveform can disrupt everything real fast with the body and what you think is going on. And some of the things Pierre was saying was like how, you start saying the same thing over and over again. You see this like with crazy people, but those things actually do mean something. And they are codes that are literally being triggered from one side of the brain and not to the other. So that way it can create some kind of lapsing and morphing within the consciousness. So that's what I'm saying. This is like, there's got to be a whole class on being a master of the waveform, right? Meaning that it's literally dealing with space-time. So we have orbits and mechanics of gravity, the planets, the moon, the satellites, the ellipticals, right? You got to get it together, flat earthers. All of this is governed by the orbits of pi. This lets you scale the earth immediately. As I said, when those who came on the boat arrive on earth, they scale earth fast because they need to know where's basically the navel. And that gets me into what I was saying before about the pyramids. I didn't finish my idea, or it wasn't even an idea. It was just, statements. But where is it? It's sitting right over the top of what would be perceived as the injection point, like the 0 point or the netherworld region of our consciousness is where this pyramid is sitting, by the way. So this determines the seasons, the tides, space travel. So if you wanted to show up on the planet, first we scale the planet real quick, figure out where certain points are, then we drop pyramids on those points. Point those pyramids to the constellations, because we already know our bases are on those points, or our other worlds are on those points. We reorientate the planet to those points and we begin beaming in. You see what I mean? So this is like, this is sci-fi stuff, right? I'm not going to be conclusive on that, but I'm just saying this is the kind of stuff that would lead to where we're at right now with this experience and having so many beings on this planet, including the animals and the beetles and all the different things that are here. So then you have Newton's laws, Kepler's laws, general relativity. All those are encoded within this design. We have light, we have electromagnetism, and we have quantum mechanics. So again, this is mastering the waveform. We have affine structure constants. It governs how light and atoms interact. This is what I was saying about Merkaba mysticism in itself. This is basically the tool. And at this point, you can say this encompasses being able to manipulate almost everything in the reality. This underlies electronics, atomic stability, and chemistry, Schrodinger's wave, Planck's law. So once you have this, again, you have access to this. You have access to describe space-time, black holes, curvatures on the universe, the very nature of the cosmos. It's encoded in the Einstein field equations of the cosmological constant, meaning that they figured it out. And so then when people are saying, what can the geometry do? What can the geometry do? You look around you. There is almost no limitations to what the geometry has done in that respect. And that's why it's so powerful. So we have also within okay, so what I just gave you was basically the pentagram, if you may, or pi. This is the next level when you begin to deal with the hexagram, because what you're getting into is you're getting into ruling through the illusion of magic, okay? On the outskirts, meaning like basic one-on-one of messing with this design is one can easily rule through the illusion. Let me explain that. Because this particular geometry, it is in itself the divine geometry. Let me just hit this in real quick here. Oh my goodness, let's go to number 4. I just want you to have these notations as I read through them. 4 got skipped here. 4. So this geometry right here is almost like it's saying off-world. This geometry right away is already embedded within the spiritual systems. And this is why okay, the pentagram is fleshly. That's why I was telling everybody before, like, even though it has a lot to do with lots of spiritual things, but in its traditional context, it's the flesh. That's why the greatest thing it could create in many ways is like us, the human beings, the pentagram bodies, right? Flesh. But this other one, this hexagram, and again, we still understand if you circle in a straight line, this hexagonal patterns, which you can call the the flower of life, etc. These patterns, they immediately start dealing with the spiritual aspects of things. So the first thing is, of course, in the religions, you got the Star of David. You got the yantras right away in Hinduism also showing these symbols to you. This hexagon, if you may. This is the alchemical and occult symbols that have high symbolic value, but limited to the direct impact on the physical world. See what I mean? And this perfection is at 60 degrees. symmetrical as 60 degrees times 60, I believe. You also see this in the tilings in the art, the tessellations of the mandalas and the MC Escher's designs, right? It shapes beauty and symmetry and the human creative expression. We have hexagonal tilings and triangle symmetry that align at the angular divisions of pi. So remember, the pentagram and the hexagram, or the 5-pointed star and the 6-pointed star, interlace at a certain point. This is why I call these symbols the Ark and the Mark. The pentagram and the hexagram, the Ark and the Mark. They're the powerful forces of the two different worlds, the cherubim and the seraphim, the masculine and the feminine. This is why it's encoded in Washington. The straight line versions of the two intersect at a certain point geometrically. And then now you get the human, because it is a composition of the hexagonal and the phi, or what we would say is the Taurus and the blazing star. The blazing star in the middle with the Taurus around it. So we have this graphite. Okay, so this is how you know something is on the next level with the pattern, because quartz, as you see, in crystals naturally produce this hexagonal pattern, okay? And snowflakes, okay? Of course, beehives, but also graphite. When you grind it down, it's still just there as hexagonal cubes, if you may, or balls, right? But the deeper aspects of this is glass, as I was mentioning. You notice crystals, snow, water, glass. So these are all things that you can't generally see. Anything below a certain level of comprehension is stupefied by this kind of stuff. Like, how do crystals work? How can people get information from crystals? And as I said, the entire computer is nothing but crystals inside of these silicone chips. And we got all this stuff going on, but you don't act like somebody's going to just easily be able to explain to you how all this works. That's why occultism is like that. That's why spirituality is like that. It's not so easy to explain to people something that they can't see, but it holds power over them. And it's a greater power for the sheer fact that they can't see it. Also, wave interference. One creates a wave, like the sine wave. The other one can interfere with it. The hexagonal patterns emerge in the sound resonance and the fluid dynamics and the vibration modes of the Chladni patterns, because there's a fine tune, if you may, right? Like even with a guitar and with strings, there's a fine tune. The fine tune points meet at the angles of the hexagonal pattern in that way. So it's basically saying that you tune phi to perfection with this design. So this is the electromagnetic fields, right? This is what creates the matrix in itself. The hexagonal broiling zone in the solid state physics. This is all the way down to the graphene, to the photonic crystals in the resonant chambers. This is the base building blocks of the foundation of the reality that you can't see, the atomic structure. This drives the advanced electronics and the optics and the material sciences, right? Like, why does something melt? Why do things transfer into another state when they're exposed to a certain type of frequency, right? This is the Fourier analysis and the lattice symmetry that's revealed within this domain of the phi structured frequencies. Finally, without taking us all back to school, they mention that this is a hexagonal storm on Saturn, that there's a molecular symmetry in the carbon and in the benzene and in the snowflakes. And this is nature's foundation of the building blocks, and is based on the symmetry that governs how matter organizes itself, okay? Because the pentagram is chaotic, but gets organized inside of this structure through its natural laws, basically keeping you alive, while again, people are still practicing the lesser craft, so they're aging. So basically, if you're in a phi-based vehicle, it's entropy because it's not completely balanced. However, when you put a phi field around it, it can stand upright, it can walk, it could do all types of things, and the entropy is slower. It does ultimately decay but the period is much longer. So if one was still aware completely of the field that was around them, they would not die. And that's what the secrets of resurrection is. And this is why they keep that. Like, no, man, we can never tell them about oscillating field going on around the body. Could never tell them about that. We'd be dealing with them. We wouldn't be able to cut them off. And that's what I was saying before. So when a capstone is removed, the head is cut off. This is literally like a human that doesn't have knowledge and wisdom and doesn't know how to think. And while people be like, yo, it doesn't matter, you don't need the brain. All right, my guy. Like, I don't want to talk to you about this anymore. I'm tired of people deflecting off to fanciful ideas that can't even be balanced and grounded into really anything in the structure. So thus we can't build off of it. Let's just deal with facts. And if we had just dealt with facts, we would have been expanded to the power of a nuclear bomb, but internally. So the conclusion of this is this. I just want to read this to you because this is why you must activate. We have here, now, first of all, I was going to remove a certain part of this because it says it's all the Jews, but I don't want to really blame. I don't want to play the blame game today, so I'm going to scroll past that. Because the creator of the chart was just like at his own epiphany moment. It's all the Jews, right? However, just not all of them, right? I guess all of them are like America. You don't find everybody in America agreeing with what's going on in America, right? So in that way, all the Jewish people do not agree with what the secret societies that run the Jewish people are doing. And we should be very aware of that. Like, that should be common sense. So I'm going to read this really briefly because the old world is gone. So even though, gone in the way of that, it's people are aware of what the old world consists of. I just explained it to you. Like, it was more focused around dealing with entities and spirits and dealing with the women and bringing in other entities that had different power and discovering mysteries and secrets about breaking time and bending time and laws and rules of the matrix and connecting with other spirits and gods and all that type of stuff. That's what we were doing as a collective. Again, I'm not also saying that it was golden years that time either, because it's, when you get families and you get people and you get inclinations and you get imbalance, you're going to get I Ching. So in a certain point, the families are going to start fighting. The people are going to start being abused. The weak are not going to be protected. Those with strength are going to be feared. And the ones with intelligence are going to be eliminated. So there's I Ching that happens when you bring in imbalance and you don't bring enough balance. That's why we have these schools, because the school will be like, yo, you just got to go to school and learn all this. So here is the last, wow, can we say 300 years, 200 years? Let me give it to you. At the dawn of this new world civilization, esoteric knowledge of great power was guarded by priests that began in Babylon, building the tower, which is an alteration to DNA, and then further moving into Egypt with the plan, harnessing metaphysical energies symbolized by entities such as Moloch. These priesthoods laid foundations for the secret societies of today, notably the Illuminati, the Freemasons, and the Knights Templars, whose lineages continue through occult rituals and secret symbolism, influencing the global power structure. These Templars control vast wealth. They established early banking systems and they sowed seeds of financial manipulation still evident today in institutions like the Federal Reserve, the IMF, and the World Bank. Their spiritual lineage merged with the Jesuits and the Vatican leadership, forming an influential alliance shaping geopolitical decisions and religious narratives, controlling the masses through organized religions and subtle spiritual warfare. By the Renaissance, And into modern times, the hidden power evolved into the Illuminati and Freemasonry, infiltrating influential political families, such as the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Through their banking and oil empires, they financed both sides of the conflict, including the World War I and the World War II, leading to widespread chaos, allowing consolidation of global control via institutions like the United Nations and the CFR. And again, this is the new world. Post-World War II, Operation Paperclip secretly relocated Nazi scientists, leading directly to the advances in mind control experiments, which had already been which had already been conducted on the people who were experimented on in Auschwitz, and participated in the Holocaust as we know it, which means burnt offering. These tactics, such as MK Ultra and Project Monarch, facilitated through the secret societies and agents, also known sometimes as CIA, Mossad, and MI6. These projects perfected psychological manipulation techniques utilized in mass media, in Hollywood propaganda, and in subliminal messaging to shape a public perception and behavior. Simultaneously, technologies developed by Nikola Tesla were covertly weaponized into programs like HARP, chemtrails, and direct energy weapons, enabling weather manipulation, population control, and environmental crises, creating false flag operations like 9/11, the Oklahoma City bombing, and various staged shootings that further the narrative of perpetual threats, justifying increased surveillance and the erosion of freedoms, ultimately leading to a technocratic surveillance state orchestrated through the NSA and DARPA and Silicon Valley corporations. Health became a new frontier for control. The widespread of engineered viruses such as AIDS, Ebola, Zika, and COVID, and then the mandatory vaccination program serving a dual purpose. Eugenics agendas, like what's on the Georgia Guidestones, Agenda 21, Agenda 25, Agenda 2030, which are all recorded and on Wikipedia. And embedding technologies like RFID chips to establish a biometric digital fortress of identities, controlled via 5G networks and smart grid infrastructure. The financial sphere was meticulously manipulated through engineering economic collapses and the introduction of cryptocurrency and paving the path to cashless societies under complete digital surveillance. This was aligned with a geopolitical agenda designed to destabilize nations and create dependencies through manufacturing wars like Vietnam, the Gulf War, the War on Terror, the War on Gaza, controlling the immigration crisis, and strategic interventions in the Middle East to maintain global dominance and secular resources like oil. In parallel, cultural conditioning intensified via social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and entertainment giants like Netflix and Disney subtly steered the global consciousness and facilitating ideological polarizations through their media. Simultaneously, PSYOP campaigns, QAnon, Pizzagate exploited real concerns to divide, distract, and delegitimize genuine resistance. The culmination of these strategies envisioned as the New World Order, a centralized global government enforced through a digital identity, universal surveillance, transhumanist ideologies enforced by militarized agencies like FEMA. Behind this, the esoteric core beliefs persist of the original controllers, propagated by occult rituals and symbolism and mass rituals in major public events, furthering and exploiting this and spiritually manipulating people to control them. Ultimately, this interconnected web spanning ancient mysticism, financial manipulation, psychological warfare, technological dominance, geopolitical conflicts, and cultural programming reveals a meticulously orchestrated plan for global domination under the guise of security, perceived unity, and progress. This is the New World Order. And this is what must be dismantled. This is what we must move internally to remove from our past and to remove from our patterns while still being aware of the core scenarios and situations in which occurred that made this a part of our reality now. I will also close out in mentioning that in the last Tribe Vibes, I also brought forth the information about Flower of Life. There was an addendum that needs to be placed into that wisdom, which I have placed in the past, and it was about the geometry of the Flower of Life still attracting what is known as entropy, which means just like the planet is on a wobble, that with the configuration of the geometry as it currently is, that it would eventually produce to where there would be, just like inside of the pyramid, a gateway open to what we could perceive as negativity or distortion. Some have come forth perfecting the geometry and the design. So what I have done personally, since we now have so much power in our hands, is I created a simple program that will generate the perfect field or nest known as the field of unity in 16:9, so it can be even used as wallpaper to subtly train the consciousness of how to see through the matrix. So I will also place this inside of the notes and files for this build from today. I would also like to thank my brother Nikhil for coming back through and mentioning such things to make sure that the opus of our knowledge and our wisdom is not incomplete and can't be refuted later on in time or or discrepancies can't be brought against it, because all things should be considered. We also, as an addendum, agreed that in these times, the geometry that has been purveying and being used has become the geometry of control, no different than the symbolism and things that we have in our reality right now controls the mind. It is important for the adept to be aware of all systems in this multidisciplinary so that they're able to easily point out these errors, especially when someone is ranting and raving about something that they may not know the full entailment of. And so with all of this being said and us being exactly at the 3-hour mark, I also wanted to mention, actually, there's a few final thoughts here. And one of them is that, again, when we see this geometry then reflected into a straight line, we have what I perceive to be the ark and the mark. And the ark in itself is the covenant, meaning that it is actually the symbol of the fusion together of the angelic, or what you would say is the fire, and also, or what we could even say is the reptilian, and the pentagram, or what you could say is the mammalian, or the phi base, or the flesh based geometry, that it serves as a symbol of the unity and the covenant between those two forces, which create the synthesis of the birth of the entities that are coming in and out of this planet infinitely. It should be noted that the word for Mars is Ma'adim, which also connects in with many words that we're using in the English language today to even derive a woman, but actually mean a male. and that such inversions and confusion inside society still need to be sorted for the natural love of life, that people need to be aware of how these energy fields move so that they don't end up confusing one thing for another and then getting shipwrecked because they find that in the end that it doesn't completely work for them in the way that they expected, such as the pentagram itself as a symbol is the mark of the beast. It is the cloven footprint, if you may, of the ram, which is just a mark of a beast. You know, they just like, yeah, when it steps in the ground, this is the mark that it leaves. And that is, again, how deep knowledge becomes so mystified, like the I am what I am statements that people over analyze and thus miss the mark. And so the ark and the mark is the hexagram and the pentagram. And through those powers, that is in which, and through those powers is in which how the world is governed at this stage. I trust that we will continue to perfect our geometries, that we will add curves to our straight lines in order to balance them out, and that most importantly, we will realize the balance and focus inside of ourselves. I also wanted to let everybody know here, because we're going to open up Q&A, but we really want to do like a 30-minute, since there are many that have been here for a while. I have noticed that sometimes when we get into the 4-hour, 5-hour stints, many are fatigued. So, you know, there's a certain amount that everyone can handle here. So I would ask that to be kept in consciousness as the question and answer scenario goes through. And I will also ask for the Sergeant of Time, which is a new position becoming available, to interject when they feel that we have reached that stage of the conclusion of the Q&A session, right, with all things considered. And so at this point, as I'm glancing through my notes, I feel that I've covered most things that I had here to elaborate on today. I believe that the cup is full. It not only gives us the complete top down of everything that's happening, from the most esoteric to a complete vision of what has been done exoterically because of what goes on behind the scenes, and that also words like they can immediately be answered when somebody says, who is they, as if they don't know who we're talking about, right? So I'm going to go ahead and open it up. I'm going to set the line so that way we can get some questions and comments in. Again, I trust that you were able to connect and dial into the power of the message today, and that it was able to clear up some things for you that I have found through my 14 or 15 or 16 years, however long it's been in occultism, have been continuously obscured. And we can also see why, because either someone would lack the rest of the pieces of putting this knowledge together, or they would be already inside of one of these groups already and thus like in total denial and deflection, or so there's a ton of reasons. Being involved in an organized religion where even saying this kind of stuff, there's like so many reasons why this knowledge has not fully made it to the world so they can make sense of what's going on around them. Wholeness. And also, lastly, I did want to mention, remember, you know, we're real in the field, we're alive, we're in effect, we're human beings, we're actually doing this, and not a robot. It's been, you know, quite a bit of time on this journey. It takes a lot to continue to pierce through all this. And, you know, I do this for all my family and my tribe here. Like, I've seen beings here for years grow through their experience, and I can see how they've changed and how they've become greater. And that's what gives me the awareness and the inclination to continue on with this journey, this adventure, and this direction, if it could be called that, of elaborating on the consciousness of all realities. So yes, let's go ahead and open it up. I got the lines unmuted. Sean normally regulates this, so he's going to come in and do his thing. I do appreciate it. And yes, send a wholeness and love to the tribe.
Wholeness, my brother, man. Standing ovation, family. Give it up to the brother. He went in. My man, he sure did. Giving thanks, family, as always. man, just a potent build, brother. Like this is one of them ones we got to go back in on for sure. Like
So we might have to
heavy,
drip this one
heavy.
on YouTube just to let them know, like, yo, you need
Yes,
to catch up. Just be
yes.
aware. Just be aware.
This is where we at. But man, give me thanks, brother. So look, let's go. Like you said, let's be mindful of the time. And if you're gonna speak today, you might as well put your hand up now because after about 2 minutes, I'm gonna make a cutoff, and then we're gonna rock out the rest of the day and have a great one. So, my brother Mark, it looks like he's up first. Come in, brother Wholeness.
Wholeness. First off, thank you, Seven. Thank you, Sean, for hosting as always. Um, so I'm gonna keep this brief. I'm just gonna ask the main questions. And I know Seven, you are thorough. Whenever I ask a question, you like blow it out of. I mean, you don't blow it out of proportion, but you give me the whole thing. Um, if you could keep it brief too, just so that I can ask every single little question, because I just want to make sure that I really got the whole transmission. That's the whole idea. So first thing first, why virgins? Why are they so obsessed with virgins? Why virgins? I see.
From the text, anyone going through a first time experience that is traumatic to them leaves a mark on them and anything else that they produce.
Thank you. Um, so when you're talking about calculations, were we talking about the pyramids, temples? Like, is that where the copulations were taking place with these other beings?
Exactly. What we're calling fire is actually a medium or a gateway from the stars directly to us. And that gateway has an aperture. This aperture is often influenced by the moon. So there's an alignment that takes place. And when that happens, there is a time for copulation, like spring.
Right. Thank you. And another question: where is that going on now? And who are these creatures that is doing the for lack of a better word, the raping, and where is it going on now?
From my observation, I've noticed that many of the societies, especially embedded within the Christianity and many of the different sects, such as in Catholicism, boys' homes, girls' homes, etc., always consistently have reports of people that are in some type of sexually oppressed scenario that, when examined further, seems to be ritualistic, including the Mormons.
So thank you so much for that answer. And then, uh, okay. So real quick, I'm just gonna repeat what I understood to make sure that I'm getting it correctly, right? So basically, the pyramids were parts of the old world. This is where you went to get in tune with whatever entities they were dealing with at the time. And for them to bring in the new wall, what they did is they took the capstone off, which was basically the head, which cut that whole world off from this realm. So basically, they can no longer, not only can they no longer interact with this world, we can no longer really interact with them because the resonator has been taken offline. And basically, what they're doing is what they are doing for the new world now, they are taking these virgins, which is also what they were doing in the old world, but now they're dealing with different beings that are debased. And this is how they bring more of them into this world, right? They take virgins from our world, they rape them, and this is how they create more beings that they cannot be in control of. And these beings are the ones that are in the background in this world. Is this correct?
We should say that in the terminology, even when we say virgin, now in this world, we're not always talking about a female that hasn't, had, her time, whatever you want to call it, because they're a virgin mind, and virgin means new to something. So even when a person goes into the spiritual world for the first time, they're technically a virgin for the first time. And some of the experiences that can happen to people when they go through a spiritual experience first, especially if astral hygiene hasn't been practiced, etc., often leaves them open for this continual ricochet of similar manipulations. And so what we find is that, again, in priestcrafts, there seems to be this ritualistically scenarios where something innocent is defiled, not necessarily sexually, but even mentally, spiritually, through the dream, something like this. And it begins to leave a negative impression on the person, and which increases the fear. And in this fear, the person can be completely ruled over just through that gateway. Things like the pyramid highlight the power and inner workings of realities, DNA, like the fine-tuned stuff. Like when we say, hey, how does God operate, if you may, or how do you build a world? This geometry and this set, if you may, can answer those questions. Like, this is how it was built. And that's why it was credited to Anunnaki, fallen ones, beings from the stars, etc., the building of these kind of structures. So when we look in other parts of the world, other types of temples and things, we can see patterns like, hey, geometry really controls what's coming out of this. I believe we would be foolish to think that everything that comes out of these temples is evil. What I believe when you look at the geometry specifically, though, like what you get is like in the pyramid, we see that there is a proficient use of masculine geometry with almost no feminine geometry being used. So this would thus dial the person in through resonance to something that would be more like that. So these kind of things are, you don't want to speak definitively of, like, for instance, when the capstone was removed, it's like removing a part of the body. So in this way, the person can never die, or the race can never die, or the offspring can never die, but it would be like that they were moving around without their heads, like a zombie in a certain way. And this could kind of further their inability to actually realize what's going on. It's almost symbolic in itself, and that's why there's many layers to this. Like when you remove someone's mind or someone's thoughts or someone's ability to comprehend, you can easily influence them. Thus, a pyramid is the top-down structure of the top controlling everything else at the bottom. So again, you get this layering of the truth that as we move through time, the objects, the entities themselves, the offspring, all get used to do different things, oscillate in position and roles. But for the most part, what you're speaking is, or what you're saying is, what you gather from what I was mentioning is true. And because you can find this also, whether you go to a pyramid or not, I'm not saying personally you go and do it, but when I was observing a lot of these more cult-like gatherings, such as Burning Man and these kind of things, there was undertones of this kind of thing going on, whether you could perceive it or not. Like, you clearly knew that there were entities in the music. You clearly knew this obsessive use of sacred geometry and projecting it all over the place wasn't just for the visuals, but had in itself some type of effect. You can tell this even with the music and what people were doing when they combined the music and the drugs together. So what I'm saying is all this is by design, though. Like, there's literally something that's there keeping up the old practices in a modern way. So even though you're not seeing the big bin and all that temple and the regalia and the crosses and the gold and all this kind of stuff that would be in all these rituals, especially by the royalties as they were participating in them, you're seeing like the 2025 or 21st century version of it. You see what I mean? So now, instead of the pyramid being something out in the water, or excuse me, something out, well, I guess it was underwater for a period too, but basically something out in the desert, it's now something people carry in their pocket with the $1 bill. You see what I mean? And the necromancy is placed on the dollar now, and the dollar is shaped like phi, which is the golden door, the golden mean. And so you got a dead president on there, which is necromancy. You see what I mean? So the art has changed, but the symbols still remain. I would say the craft. The craft has changed. That would be the best word. The craft has changed. The symbols remain the same. So once you know the symbols, you can already tell. And so it's not always, I see a person with a pyramid, they're evil. But you can start adding things up. Like, okay, check one, they wearing a pyramid. Okay, check two, they got the, and too many of those, you start noticing, okay, something's off here. And, and that's just, based on how I've been experiencing it, not making any conclusive judgments off of one thing that I read, but gathering all the knowledge, like what we brought forward today. You got 15, 20 books, and here's what's all deduced from that, with them all being together to give you a clear picture.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. And I promise this is the very last question. It's just that
21 minutes to Mark.
Yes, sir. So we were talking about Starfire, and basically in the end, you dropped the bomb that Starfire is just essentially menstrual blood, and which is a big deal when it comes to occultism. And you tied that to the moon. And basically, what I wrote down is that the shed of a woman's menstrual cycle is a lunar being. Here's my question. So now that we're saying that it's a lunar being, because essentially where I immediately went to was the tonal and Nawal, right? It's like, I think Native American, the Native American tradition of like a person being having like a solar part and a lunar part, and that's immediately where I went to. Does that correlate, one? And then two, would at this point the solar being be coming from your father at that point? And yeah, that's my last question. Thank you.
Thank you. You can see why there's many connotations of the thoughts that God is a male, because in understanding the process of the creation in itself, in a mind that's almost there. And, obviously the graduation is to understand that the totality is in itself what you're saying. All things combined in one, so there is no that the female was the first and the male was the first. What you're actually dealing with is a composite. And when we're also discussing even creation in itself, menstrual fluids and these kind of things, we are entering into that realm that is a bit more obscure to like completely define. So much that I actually even may have slipped from what the actual question is. Just give me the question.
So the big question was, is the shed from a woman's menstrual cycle, is that the lunar part that will eventually make up the human being?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. From then, when you get into, what they say, like in the Shomer Imunim, it gets into the shells. Okay. And what this would technically mean is that there's a place that, because there's not just one woman doing this, right? And also there's female animals that are also doing this, that this force congeals. And, again, trying to word this is very tough. So what we would basically be saying is like these forces are recycled. When the process happens of the birth, if it finds its pair, if it finds its match, then it makes it into the physical, what we call a physical reality. If it doesn't, then it sits in the darkness, if you may, and congeals in the darkness, like in itself, individualized prima materia, until it is recycled. Now, when we say that, we're saying that woman has a cycle, right? So recycling is that this same force is then going to be drawn again And I can't explain to you how this happens. It's definitely hyperdimensional, but the force is going to be drawn in again, recultivated, and then given the opportunity again. No different than like what you would see like a reincarnation process would be like. It's like, okay, this was a aborted fetus, if you may. And there's a lot of discussions about this in occultism because in certain ways, even this period of time of recycling is the life of another being. See what I mean? And then when we look at our world and our lives, there's kind of a time frame on us living here too. And then we're going to recycle this husk, the physical body, right? But the spiritual is going to move on. So this is the same thing that we're talking about with the shed. But then we got to go deeper because the worlds of the sheds are also in themselves ruled by intelligences. And this is why they love to say, hey, the intelligences, the principalities. This means that this material is not just like something laying on the floor without thought. It is an emanation or an expulsion from a living force, which we would say then is the woman. So, you know, that's as much as I can really give it. I can give you on this one. You know what I mean? Like we enter in the dark zone. But, you know, and this is also, but I can connect something else to this. And this is when I heard some women discussing some of these secrets that, you know, males weren't privy to, it only involved these menstruation cycle. It only involved what to properly do with it. Because there were some things about taking it to nature. Like the entire occultism for the priestess craft is centered around this fluid and what to do with it. So much to a point that even in Islam today, men were not allowed to be around women when they were on the menstruation cycle, especially when you were asleep. Because the menstruation cycle also opens connection to this other world, and that could be harmful for the man. Okay, so if he ain't, you know, this is what I'm just telling you what is written there. But I can tell you that, you know, I don't necessarily practice that, but, you know, having two girls in the house, I do see things get a little weird energetically. Like it's just an energetic thing. Like, you know, I'm not saying anything negative about it, but things are different. Something's going on around that time. And sometimes it can get a little spooky for me. But I just know something's going on. Let's just put it like that. I don't always got to go try to figure out what's going on. I just go to my part of the house. Let's just put it like that. So just in conclusion, there's some mystical, powerful, very, because also when we're talking about the recycling, we're talking about, well, what happens? Who's going to conduct the world of the dead? Okay, let's get into this. And I think that this unlocks a lot for us. Let's put a little extra 20 minutes on to the Q&A. Not that I'm going to take that time, but just for everybody else. But let's just kind of understand this from the most logical standpoint here from what we've learned. Like, if the pyramid in itself was created for, let's say, the male energy to reproduce what would be normally going on in the female's body, it would equate to pyramids being able to pull people from the netherworld into the physical reality and somehow reanimate them inside of some type of body, because that's what women do. They pull souls from the river, the dark river of Styx, where you look in the river and there's glowing lights like stars. So a woman pulls these stars out of these rivers through her womb, through the vertex, right? Because everything here is like a vortex, black hole suction kind of thing. So it pulls these seeds, or what we call fire seeds, from this river and into their body. This could be what's happening when the egg is first germinated, something that's going on that even the male doesn't even need to be present for in that way, okay? And then let's say, because the pyramid is like an external womb in itself. That's what the craft is. And then the cohabitation is going on with angelic forms that have been consecrated to bring in certain kind of entities. So this is the same thing even with women and the kind of children that they would bring into the world. So logically, what we're able to do is just deduce exactly what the purposes for the pyramids were with the occult. and then how ultimately what we're talking about is a gateway to the netherworld. First, one being strictly organic. This is the female's body in her womb. And then an attempt to do the impossible, to actually create a physical version of one to connect into that world. And then from there, we get the rites of Osiris. We get a whole cult that's built around death and resurrection. A cult that eliminates the woman altogether as being the fecundating component and insists that God is a man and that his son is the one that you should follow and all else is sin, or the moon, which is the name of the moon and our sin. So yeah, bake on some of this. You can, using the blueprint, you can decode woman's body, in this case being the blueprint to the pyramid. You can decode what they were doing on an external level to create the same effect, if you may. But of course, this effect, one being organic. And that's why they say the pyramids led to the creation of the second man. That wasn't in our text, but this is also was in the notes, that there seemed to be two different kinds of creations, some that came from the pyramids and some that came from the womb goddess, if you may. You see what I mean? And then the entering of Akhenaten, there's like a rerouting of where the souls are coming from. And, you know, for all we know, this is because a lot of this has to still do with Sirius. It has to do with the black dog. It has to do with, so for all we know, there was a changing from creating where the Ka was of a certain kind of material, and then it was switched into being another kind of material. This is, you know, such things would be matters of the occult in themselves and, you know, would need deep exploration. But just the surface levels and at least mid, we can kind of understand what was going on and why it has all these interesting connotations around it, like sacrifice. Because then what you get, and this quote is very disturbed, is that it's like they're literally sacrificing a newborn for the replacement of an old shed. So maybe within their rights, and again, I'm saying maybe, but just leaving everybody a way out in that way. But from what I've observed and what we were just reading about in the Epic of Atrahasis, how there had to be a replacement for someone. So if you go to this underworld and you are trying to come back. Now, first of all, as is taught in deeper teachings, if you go to the underworld, it was because you went deeper into division. Basically, something didn't work out for you. So then you can see why they could promise certain people, especially bad people, like the Roman Catholics used to do, hey, you can buy basically a resurrection. You can buy a ticket into heaven. You see what I mean? But they would need to prove that. That's not something you would just take on face value. So apparently, just like what you see with the ultimate resurrection of Jesus, they could prove, hey, we could bring someone back from the dead. So if you have enough money, if you have enough influence, if you join our society, you will never die. This is what comes in some of these occult promises. Even in Christianity, this is what the promise is. So whether the promise is kept or not, I think that's what should be examined. But to perform this necromantic rite, remember, we're talking about the city of Necropolis. To perform this necromantic rite, you needed to replace a newborn with the old person that died. And in that way, it's almost like the sleight of hand thing that Indiana Jones does in the beginning of the movie, where he moves the idol and puts a bag of sand. So that way you don't create an imbalance or a perceived imbalance between the worlds. It's like you just took someone out of the nether region and you didn't put something back. See what I mean? And this is what sacrifice is. It's about balancing and weighing out. But in certain ways, you're taking something from somebody else. And this is what makes the culture entropic, because they're constantly taking energy from something, like they're robbing the energy and the life from something. You see what I mean? So then people grow up in a society, they never even get a chance to live because some oligarch then sucked all the life out of them, their family, the whole nine. Because when you're on the below, you got to actually see how the above affects the below, or what happens in these high places, quote unquote. Remember, they used to talk about in the Bible that the high places were full of wickedness. There wasn't a concept that the high places was the place where everything pure and great happened. They talk about Satan being a spirit of the air. You see what I mean? So our concepts sometimes of things that are high or good and things that are low or bad are also misfound. So we're talking about high level doing the impossible, bringing things from another dimension into this dimension. And then when things leave this dimension, being able to get them back into this dimension. Same thing like the Tibetan priests, right? They somehow figured out a way to get those boys that were the Lama back into a new boy's body. So I would research in that way these mysteries more for the connection to what these priestcrafts are doing, because it doesn't appear that any of them are really omitting this. Like there's not a new priestcraft coming up saying, hey, we don't do that anymore. It's more of there's priestcrafts in ancient societies developed that know about how to do this. So I'll just sit there.
That was beautiful, fam. I think that that's where we should end at today. I think that the brother brought forward, yeah, I think he brought forward
okay.
the questions
I'm not in control here. Y'all deal with Sean.
Hey, I'm playing my ace card today, but
Okay.
I think because we'll be here for another hour, brother, at this point. And I think this was a good point to like close it down at. That really brought in.
I mean, I would also agree. Of course, we could go further, but our brother asked some really, really polished questions.
Yes.
And so, of course, if you have something that's still pending, because I know there's hands up, definitely, write those things down. Get at us in Discord. Talk to us even on the next show, maybe even in the beginning. We'll get it in. But I think again, our cup is full. We're at 3.5 hours. There's a lot to bake on. And of course, you got the rest of the day. And I also wanted to say, let me turn my camera on here, to everyone that, still remember, like, first of all, this stuff is, really fascinating. I find nothing greater than learning more about myself and why I'm here. But I would also, again, encourage, as I said in the beginning, as a disclaimer, to remember that there's very deep levels to this. And it could easily be confused or done improperly or given the wrong impression by somebody else that's just stumbling into the great mysteries, right? And thinking that they know what they're doing when they're trampling on the sacred. So I would definitely make sure that we adjust ourselves for that and allow our views to be broader with the aspects of creation, because they do involve things that are very mature for us to ingest and to really understand. And it's not like that was what our parents were always teaching us, right? So it's sometimes a bit foreign for us to know about these mysteries. I also wanted to mention that, wow, like we've gone so far in this time and we're going to continue to go, like the message is going to continue to come through. But remember, the basics to this really are in the vibration and holding your energy and knowing that when something's trying to push you into the negs, you already know where that force is coming from and you don't want to live in that space and time. But make no mistakes, it does exist. There are people getting pulled deeper and deeper into it every day. We're always on the climb. We're always sending out life rafts, but it is still each person's individual purpose to regulate their energy field. So I give that to you. And in that, you have all the power and you are sovereign. Wholeness. Wanted to open it up
Wholeness,
for
family.
wholeness.
Yep.
Wholeness.
Yo, giving thanks for this space. Wholeness.
This is good stuff.
Wholeness.
Yeah.
Have a beautiful, strong everyone.
Have a good rest.
Enjoy the sun.
Wholeness. Everyone do well.
Wholeness, family.
All right,
Till
wholeness
next
family.
time.
Check the archives for sure. Check the notes. I'll make sure I include everything there.
Wholeness.
Wholeness.
Yes, indeed.
Big life. I see you, fam.
Right. Wholeness, fam. Thank you so much.
Yo, hit Discord if you got any, if you want to like continue the conversation, definitely, dial in the Discord. We over there. So
Absolutely. And love
Big
to your
love.
family.
Adios, family.
Good seeing you, brother. Thanks for the support, my guy.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
see you.
I'm representing.
Hold it up.
Sure.
No doubt.
All
right, family. Have a great rest of the day. Big love. Wholeness.